Chapter 1711. Plang, plang, plang. Even though Master was dead, Berserker was still as ferocious as ever. He and Saber were engaged in a fierce battle. Berserker seemed to have realized that he would soon leave this world. Not only did he not weaken his attacks, but he also kept the remaining magic power in his body and unleashed it all. Instead, he became more and more courageous as he fought. He used up all of his magic power. His obsession with Saber was so deep that it felt like he wanted to drag her down with him. With Saber's arrogant personality, even if I helped her once, she would not appreciate it. Instead, she would blame me for being a busybody. Are all the ancient people so stubborn? What a troublesome problem, girl. Staring at Saber with a headache, Dustless sighed. For Saber, the so-called dignity of a knight should not be trampled on. It was more important than anything else. Even if she died, she would not care. But, looking at Berserker's heavy armor, Dustless warned, Saber, put some distance between you and that guy for now. Dustless, you, Saber frowned. She felt an unknown power flowing in Dustless's body. She angrily stopped him and said, Dustless, even you want to trample on my dignity as a knight like Wei Gong Qixi. However, Dustless was silent. He ignored Saber and stared at Berserker with his cold eyes. Path of destruction. Black coffin. Swoosh, swoosh. The black light that filled the sky bombarded Berserker's body. He was immediately pushed back. Berserker's tough armor also had visible cracks. Dustless, you. Seeing such a scene, Saber was not happy. Instead, she was furious. For the first time, she was filled with dissatisfaction and resentment towards Dustless. Saber, if you want to punish him, it's not too late to see the situation. Pointing at Berserker's direction, Dustless said, this guy's true colors are about to be revealed. True face. Saber was stunned when she heard that. She looked at Berserker and saw that the cracks on his armor were getting bigger and bigger until they spread all over his body. This is... Saber's gaze was fixed on Berserker's body. Attacked by the black coffin, the steel armor gradually peeled off. Saber's beautiful eyes suddenly shrank, revealing a familiar face. Lancelot. Why are you Berserker? Saber's mind went blank as she stared at the face. King Arthur. After Dustless destroyed his impenetrable armor, Berserker's consciousness became much clearer. Although he was still very violent, he was not as crazy and reckless as before. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. However, Berserker only hesitated for a moment before attacking Saber with his relic. His speed was so fast that even Dustless could only catch a glimpse of a blurry shadow. Seeing that Berserker was about to approach Saber while the latter was still in shock, Dustless had no choice but to interrupt the match and help Saber. 10,000 Celestial Attraction. A strong gravitational force suddenly appeared, and Berserker's body suddenly became sluggish. His body could no longer move forward as Dustless's huge hand ruthlessly sucked him in. Damn you! Interrupting a battle between knights, your crime is enough for me to behead you 10,000 times. The armor on his body collapsed and disappeared. Berserker's eyes were filled with madness. He was no longer stuttering like before. Instead, he was speaking very fluently. His eyes were clear and bright as if he had found his reason after going berserk, even if it was only for a short moment. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Dustless suddenly interrupted him and Berserker was furious. Following the inertia of the gravitational force, his relic was aimed at Dustless's head. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The tip of the sword was extremely tricky and there was no way to avoid it. It seemed like he could only take the attack head-on. Hee hee. Seeing Dustless's tragic death, Lancelot Berserker's face showed a gloomy arc. He laughed ferociously like a demon. Clang 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 clang. Sparks flew in the air and Berserker's right hand that was holding the relic was numb. He thought to himself, could it be that his body is made of diamond? How could it be so hard? Berserker looked at Dustless in confusion and his jaw almost dropped. Gulp. Berserker's throat rolled as he looked over. His precious artifact was right on top of Wu Chen's forehead. It looked as if his head was about to be chopped off. However, who would have thought that a thumb would be as indestructible as a meteorite, blocking the divine sword that could cut through iron like mud? That's right, it was just a finger. Are you kidding me? This guy is not a god, how could he block my relic with just a finger? Berserker's face turned pale, and when he was about to attack, Dustless's cold and warning voice was heard. Berserker, your opponent is not me and I am not interfering in the battle between knights. Dustless said and stared at Berserker's crazy eyes. Of course, if you insist on treating me as your enemy, then I will be a qualified enemy and cripple you. If you did not interrupt my battle, Arthur's head would have been taken by me. How dare you say that you did not interrupt the battle between knights? Ridiculous. Berserker sneered. A battle between knights? How dare you say that? Dustless looked at Berserker with disdain and mocked. You knew that Saber was in a daze, but you attacked her at all costs. Is the battle between knights so dirty? Berserker's face turned red and he shouted angrily. She was distracted and she deserved to be killed. She can't blame anyone else. You are not fit to call yourself a knight. In my eyes you are a treacherous villain. Dustless sneered and he hated Lancelot. This guy used to be one of King Arthur's Knights of the Round Table, and Saber trusted him so much that she gave the task of protecting the queen to Lancelot. Then a very melodramatic scene happened. Lancelot and Saber's queen fell in love. It was precisely because Saber had absolute trust in Lancelot that she gave him such an important task. However, who would have thought that Lancelot was so shameless that he seduced the queen at that time? Although Saber forgave Lancelot in the end, in Dustless's eyes, this kind of behavior was unforgivable. He deserved to be cut into pieces 10,000 times. You should be thankful that you have a king like Saber. If it were me, Gilgamesh, or the Conquest King, you would have long been skinned alive. Now you still have the face to blame others. Chapter 17:12. You be *******. Berserker's face turned red after being scolded by Dustless. His eyes were filled with uncertainty as he stared at Dustless's face. His surging murderous intent could not be concealed and burst out like a tide. If you want to die, then come at me immediately, trash. Dustless continued to attack unceremoniously. Just looking at this idiot made him feel unlucky. If Dustless were Saber, he would definitely cut this D*****B* starred into 8 pieces and feed him to the dogs. I'm afraid that I hate people like you the most. Seeing that Dustless was going to continue attacking him, Berserker could not bear it anymore. Finally, he could not continue to be a coward. Otherwise, he would be scolded to death by Dustless. Berserker, who could not stand it any longer, charged at Dustless. Dustless snorted when he saw this. When he was about to give Berserker a fatal blow, Saber once again blocked Berserker without giving him any face. This guy is my prey. Saber stood in front of Dustless and said resolutely, Lancelot, I need to deal with him personally to end all the grudges between us. What a stubborn woman. Dustless withdrew his oppressive aura. He also understood that he could not stop her. Saber's stubbornness gave him a headache and it was not suitable for him to intervene. After all, this was a personal grudge between Saber and Lancelot. Before leaving, Dustless suddenly stopped and looked at Berserker. Then he cautiously said, You'd better be careful. In the castle of the Arensberg family. At this moment, one of the best doctors in Dongmu City was gathered in Wei Gong Qixi's room. After all, Wei Gong Qixi's balls were crushed by Jiantong Yan. This was definitely explosive news. When will his injuries recover? He still has a lot of work to do. Jiu Meimi saw the doctor coming out of the room and was relieved. Treatment? With all due respect, you should prepare for the funeral of that Mr. Wei Gong Qixi. Jiu Meimi's face was full of expectation. Who would have thought that the doctor would mercilessly give her an answer that would make her collapse? He immediately turned his head and wanted to leave, leaving behind Jiu Meimi, who was possessed. Please wait a moment. Are you saying that you are going to prepare for Qixi's funeral? After a while, Jiu Meimi, who had regained her senses, was greatly shaken. Her mind was in a mess. Wasn't it just crushed, that thing? Even if it was completely cut off, it wouldn't be so exaggerated. Cough, cough, cough. Mr. Doctor, please don't be in a hurry to leave. I still want to ask more questions. Jiu Meimi stared at the doctor and asked awkwardly, It shouldn't be that fatal, right? Cut's life force and willpower are both very strong. Willpower? That kind of tenacious spirit also depended on what kind of illness it was. This patient still has a wound on his abdomen. Although it is not fatal as expected, it has seriously weakened the patient's physical condition. Especially the condition of the gentleman on the bed is special. It has caused serious psychological trauma and obstacles. It will be very difficult for him to recover. I don't know how long he can hold on. If he can't hold on, maybe he will die in a few days. The doctor shook his head and then showed an expression of helplessness. After nagging for a while, he left. Although some diseases could be cured, the psychological trauma was too serious. Can't be saved. Why is Wei Gongqi so useless? Did he grow up without doing anything? Wu Chen, who had just rushed back, was also greatly shocked when he heard this. He originally only wanted to give Wei Gongqi a blow, but he didn't expect that the blow would go too far, leaving this guy with a serious psychological barrier. It sounded like he would die immediately if things went wrong. It seems that this time if Wei Gongqi dies, then who will provide Saber's magical power? Dustless frowned secretly. Now that Wei Gongqi is like this, it is difficult for him to survive, let alone provide Saber's magical power. According to the doctor's meaning just now, if Wei Gongqi can get out of the psychological trauma, there will be no problem for him to recover. But if he gives up, it is only a matter of time before he dies. Should I become Saber's master? A thought flashed across Wu Chen's mind as he muttered to himself. Although he was only a heroic spirit now, he was only a fake. I can let Wei Gongqi take the initiative to transplant the command seal to me. Dustless's Sharingan flashed a strange light and he smiled gloomily. This step is actually very simple. It can be completed with Genjutsu. It is really not a big problem. The key problem is Saber. If she is not willing, Dustless will be useless even if he becomes her master. Saber believes in the Knight's path. It is impossible and unrealistic for her to betray Wei Gongqi for no reason. Unless Wei Gongqi does something that Saber can't tolerate, then she can get rid of him. Forget it, consider yourself lucky for the time being. Help Wei Gongqi live for 2 more days. After careful calculation in his heart, Dustless finally chose to let Wei Gongqi live for a while. He could use wood release to slow down Wei Gongqi's illness. Of course, it was impossible to let him recover completely. Dustless only hoped that this guy could live for 2 more days. It would be best if he could hang on for a while. Even if he died, he had to wait until the end of the Holy Grail War. Chapter 1713. In Wei Gongqi's room, Alice Phil sat beside the bed and stared at the haggard man. She didn't know why, but she wasn't as sad as she used to be. The heart-wrenching pain was no longer there. Now all that was left was pure worry. It was similar to the worry between friends. Ever since Dustless and Saber appeared, her relationship with Wei Gongqi gradually went in the opposite direction. It developed further and further until today. Especially because of the relationship between Takumi Enosaka and Rin Enosaka. The two of them had a rare quarrel. Creak. The tightly closed door was gently pushed open. Dustless walked in quietly. You're here. Alice Phil's face outlined a forced smile. It looked extremely forced. Her delicate snow-white face was even paler than usual. Her spirit was also very dispirited and weak. Alice Phil, don't worry. If you're so sad, he wouldn't want to see it. Walking in front of Alice Phil, Dustless patted her shoulder and comforted her gently. Alice Phil, go out and rest for a while. Leave this to me for the time being. Alice Phil didn't pay attention to him. Instead, she suddenly attacked Dustless. Alice Phil, you're... Dustless was dumbfounded. He looked at Alice Phil, who was close to him. A strange fragrance entered his nose along Alice Phil's face. Suddenly he felt that his waist was bound. His chest was also squeezed by her proud cleavage. Looking down, Alice Phil suddenly hugged Dustless. I'm so scared. After being silent for a while, Alice Phil said softly with tears in her eyes, maybe soon I'll leave this world and rush to that unfamiliar world. That world? Dustless frowned slightly and asked, are you talking about the world after people die? Don't worry, you're so beautiful. Even those little ghosts of the King of Hell will be charmed by you. They can't bear to let you die. Alice Phil suddenly laughed. She threw a charming glance at Dustless and said, loquacious. Sometimes I wonder if you're still alive. What you do and what you think are completely different from those hero spirits. Really? Do you really want him to live that much? That way you two can have a rendezvous like this, right? An extremely oppressive and gloomy voice that was as indignant as a volcano suddenly sounded. You're awake? Dustless and Alice Phil were startled. They looked towards the source of the sound and to their surprise, it was Wei Gongqi whose face was filled with black lines. He stared at Dustless and Alice Phil ferociously. Seeing this, Alice Phil was overjoyed. You're awake. I was worried. You're worried? It's all bullshit. Wei Gongqi's eyes widened. He was so angry that he vomited 3 liters of blood. He glared angrily. He didn't expect that Alice, Phil and Dustless would get together right after he fell ill. Furthermore, it's fine if the two of you are having an affair, but you're even having an affair in my ward. Doing this kind of thing in front of me, is that exciting or fulfilling? Preposterous. How can you bully me like this? Too shameless. The two of you. You only feel a sense of accomplishment when you do this kind of thing in front of me? I suddenly woke up. Did I disturb the two of you? May I ask if you need me to continue pretending to be unconscious? Wei Gongqi stared fiercely at Dustless. His stomach swelled up and it looked like he was about to explode. Tisk, you're mistaken. The truth is not what you think. Seeing this, Alice Phil hurriedly let go of Dustless. Her face was red as she looked at Wei Gongqi's red cheeks. She couldn't help but feel ashamed deep in her heart. At this moment, Dustless suddenly stood up and didn't give Alice Phil a chance to explain. Wei Gongqi, don't you know? You're about to die. I'm helping you take care of Alice Phil. You should be thanking me. Especially now that you're just a eunuch. Moreover, you're about to die soon. You can die in peace. Leave Alice Phil and your daughter to me. Wuxian said righteously. Moreover, he pulled Alice Phil into his arms in front of Wei Gongqi. Moreover, he even kissed her delicate thin lips even more fiercely. Poochie. Seeing this scene, Wei Gongqi was momentarily stunned. In the end, he couldn't hold back the fire in his heart. He spat out a mouthful of old blood and fainted. Dustless, what are you talking about? Alice Phil hurriedly pushed Dustless away. Looking at the unconscious Wei Gongqi, she hurriedly ran out. Moreover, she was extremely anxious as she called for a doctor. Wei Gongqi, a scum like you is really lucky. Looking at Alice Phil's disappearing figure, Dustless was rather envious of this guy's luck with women. Men die for those who understand them, women dress up for those who love them. Now that Alice Phil was so anxious, it meant that although she and Wei Gongqi were estranged, she still hadn't forgotten Wei Gongqi. Forget it, I'll temporarily help you maintain your life for a few days. At least before this Holy Grail war ends, you definitely can't die. Walking in front of the sickbed, Dustless's palm emitted an emerald glow. Using the wood release method, he injected a large amount of life force into Wei Gongqi's body. What a sin, this brat better not die from anger because of me. Looking at the blood-red sheet, Dustless secretly scolded Wei Gongqi in his heart. This brat is too weak. I only took a little liberties with your wife. Is there a need to be so sad? Anyway, you have a mistress, Jiu Meimi. With her, you don't have to worry about your future life at all. Chapter 17:14. Dustless was talking to himself. If Wei Gongqi heard it, he would definitely jump up in anger. Those words were just too unpleasant to listen to. However, looking at his current state, he is not qualified to continue being Saber's master. I'm afraid he would not even be as good as me. What a useless piece of trash. After checking the condition of Wei Gongqi's body, Dustless realized that he had gone too far. Wei Gongqi was both mentally and physically exhausted. His mental power was severely overdrawn. How long he could live would depend on his body. In short, I can't let you die now. Dustless threw the complicated emotions out of his mind. He increased the life force of wood release into Wei Gongqi's body and slightly healed his wounds. After a few minutes, the fainted Wei Gongqi opened his eyes again. Dustless. Why would you be so kind as to save me? What is your goal? Wei Gongqi turned his head to look at Dustless's face and asked, what is your plan? I don't believe that you are so great. Idiot who doesn't understand human nature, get it straight. This is to save you. When you speak, remember that the person you are talking to is the benefactor who saved your life. Wuxian emphasized the word to remind him. The benefactor who saved my life. Wei Gongqi was choked by those words. His face twitched as he put on a fake smile and said, then, how do you think I should thank you? Give you Alice and Phil? Do I need you to give me that? Dustless sneered and said, after you die, everything will be mine. Your wife and daughter will be mine. Veins popped out on Wei Gongqi's face. He bit his tongue and roared, you this brat, don't go too far. After this Holy Grail war ends, you will die without a doubt. You don't have to worry about that. After sweeping a glance at Wei Gongqi, Dustless muttered to himself for a moment before revealing his intentions. Wei Gongqi, since you won't be able to hold on for long, why don't we do this? Transfer your command incantation to me and I can help you live for a while. You want my command spell? Wei Gongqi was startled and asked without hesitation, "You want to continue fighting as Saber's master? What a joke." Wei Gongqi let out a disgusting sneer as he rolled around on the bed in an exaggerated manner. "You, a servant, actually want to become a master and continue fighting? What a joke. Insensible idiot." Upon seeing this, Dustless's expression turned cold, and a sinister arc flashed in his eyes. The chakra that was channeling into Wei Gongqi's body suddenly stopped, and the chakra materialized, turning into a sharp knife that pierced into Wei Gongqi's skin. "Puchi. It hurts, you bastard, how dare you do this to me?" Wei Gongqi felt the abnormality in his abdomen, and cold sweat flowed down his forehead due to the pain. "Don't get it wrong, I don't want to become Saber's master yet. This is just an early negotiation, and the purpose is to tell you that when you can't hold on any longer, I will become Saber's master," Dustless said with certainty. If a trash like Wei Gongshiro could become master, why couldn't he? It was simply too funny. Furthermore, Wei Gongqi didn't understand Dustless's situation. In reality, he didn't die and he wasn't a true heroic spirit. "You're on your own now." Noticing that Wei Gongqi's body had regained some color, Dustless didn't overdo it. If it wasn't for Saber, it would be better for this eyesore to die. "Remember, I don't need to snatch anything from you. After you die, everything will be mine, huh?" Dustless let out a laugh that made Wei Gongqi feel nauseous. His eyes stared at Dustless, who was leaving. If the heavens could feel his wish, Wei Gongqi was willing to die together with Dustless at all costs. "Damn it, I definitely won't allow this to happen." After Dustless left, Wei Gongqi's eyes flashed, and a ruthless expression flashed across his face. "Alice Phil is the vessel on my back. If she can die for me, she should feel honored. Anyway, what awaits her is death. I definitely can't accept her becoming Dustless's mistress, and I definitely can't tolerate Alice Phil betraying me." On the bed, Wei Gongqi screamed crazily. Alice Phil was the vessel of the Holy Grail, and her ending was death. No matter who obtained the Holy Grail in the end, she would definitely die. In any case, Alice Phil once said that she would die for me. The guilt on his face disappeared in an instant, and Wei Gongqi revealed a straightforward expression. Until now, he was still dreaming of borrowing the power of the Holy Grail to become the partner of justice. However, little did he know that Wei Gongqi's crazy mutterings had all fallen into Alice Phil's ears. Alice Phil, who was standing outside the door, pursed her lips. She was flabbergasted, as if she didn't expect Wei Gongqi to be so heartless. Alice Phil had once said that she was willing to die for Wei Gongqi, but the taste and essence of everything had changed. Stupid man, like a pig. Where there are people, there will be fighting, and when there is fighting, there will be darkness. When there is darkness, there is only one way to completely eradicate the darkness of this time and become the so-called partner of justice. To exterminate the human race. Glancing at Alice Phil, who was standing in front of Wei Gongqi's bedroom door with a complicated expression, Dustless couldn't help but feel emotional. When a person's material life was satisfied, there would be spiritual enjoyment and inexplicable dreams would be born. For example, Wei Gongqi was like this. When he woke up from his dream, it was already too late. Chapter 17:15. Wei Gongqi was so heartless. Without a doubt, the one who suffered the most was Alice Phil. While the former was scheming, the latter was definitely sincere. Bang, bang, bang. At the same time, the sound of heavy footsteps could be heard. Dustless looked out of the window and saw Saber's figure. Her blonde hair was slightly messy and covered in sweat. Her expression was also pale and weak. "Looks like the victor has been decided." Lowering his head, he saw that Spare was covered in blood. Dustless couldn't find any wounds on him. It was probably all berserkers, and Saber was only slightly exhausted. "This is bad," Dustless frowned. If it was in the past, it would have been fine. However, Wei Gongqi was beaten into a eunuch by Jian Tongyan. His life was in danger. If it was not for Dustless's help, Wei Gongqi might not even be able to survive. Now he even had to provide Saber with her mana. "We have to end this Holy Grail war as soon as possible. In the battle with Berserker just now, Saber is probably exhausted as well. If this drags on, the situation will be even worse for us." A hint of decisiveness appeared in his eyes. Dustless secretly clenched his fists. If he ended this war in advance, all the problems would be solved. Originally, Dustless wanted to go back to his room to rest. However, he resolutely walked towards Alice Phil, who was in a daze. Alice Phil, I have something to tell you. I plan to go tomorrow. Before Dustless could finish his sentence, he was interrupted by Alice Phil's sobbing. How can Wei Gong Qixi be so heartless? Alice Phil's tone was filled with endless fatigue and sadness. She used to call him Qixi. Now she was calling him by his name. It was not hard to tell that there was a big problem between the two of them. There's nothing to be shocked about, little brat. Dustless smiled and advised, everyone has their own way of thinking. There's nothing perfect in this world. It's impossible to create a perfect person based on your logic. Creating a perfect partner based on yourself is only limited to fairy tales. However, that bastard Wei Gong Qixi is too heartless. Dustless changed the topic and criticized Wei Gong Qixi without holding back. After sorting out his thoughts, Dustless continued, Alice Phil, I plan to deal with Iskandar the Conqueror of Ryder tomorrow and try to end this Holy Grail war. If this drags on, it's not good for Sabe's life. No problem, I think so too. With Cutter's current state, it's impossible for him to continue helping Saber. In that case we can only rely on you, Dustless. Alice Phil looked at Wuxian with an apologetic look. She lowered her head in shame. There's nothing to apologize for. You, on the other hand. Dustless looked at Alice Phil with a complicated expression. She was the one who got hurt in the end. Just like what Wei Gong Qixi said before, Alice Phil was just a carrier of the Holy Grail. He would die no matter what. I want to end this war as soon as possible. At the same time, a cold voice suddenly came from the room. Lowering his head, he saw Wei Gong Qixi in his pajamas. Even though he tried his best to remain calm and his cheeks regained some color, deep in his soul he could still feel the exhaustion of his soul. Is this guy made of iron? He's so confident even though he's been turned into a eunuch. Dustless slandered in his heart. He did not say these words to Wei Gong Qixi. If he did not do it well, this guy would be hit hard again. Tomorrow Dustless will fight with Ryder. As for Saber, she will stay behind to protect me and Alice Phil to prevent Yen Fengqili and his archer from sneaking up on us. Time flew and the next morning came in the blink of an eye. When Saber heard that they were going to fight the Conqueror King Iskandar, she requested to fight together with Dustless. However, she was rejected by Dustless. The reason made Saber speechless. She could only stare at him. Do you want to interfere with the battle between knights? It was because of such an inexplicable sentence that Saber sensibly stayed in the castle to protect Alice, Phil and Gong Gong Qixi. Even though Dustless and Iskandar were not knights, it was still an unforgivable act to recklessly intervene in other people's duel. After thinking about it carefully, Saber also acquiesced to Dustless's idea. Alice Phil and Wei Gong Qixi really needed someone to stay behind and watch over them. This place should be enough. The thin figure stood on top of a majestic bridge. Dustless stared at the sea in the distance. This was the place where the first battle between the heroic spirits took place. Boom boom boom. Dustless stepped on the huge steel pipe of the bridge. Loud rumbling sounds were heard as the sound gradually spread to the entire city with the help of the sea breeze. This was a form of provocation. It meant, I'm right here. If you don't like it, come at me. At a remote location, the Conqueror King, who was eating with Wilbur Velvet, suddenly raised his head. When he heard the faint sound, he laughed with fighting spirit. Did you hear the horn of battle? Someone is challenging me. Iskandar clenched his fists. His eyes were like torches shining with a dazzling light. He said loudly, as a king, it's ridiculous to avoid a battle. Idiot, this could also be the sound of some construction site under construction, Wilbur Velvet refuted. There's no construction site near your house. Moreover, the source of this sound is at least a few kilometers away. If some construction site is really under construction, do you think it's possible to travel so far? Wilbur Velvet was silent. There was only one kind of person who could do such a thing, heroic spirits. Chapter 17:16. Writer, who is the person who issued us a challenge? Is it Archer or Saber? Or is it the 8th heroic spirit? That fellow is the most terrifying. I really don't wish to encounter him. When the 8th heroic spirit was mentioned, Wilbur Velvet's body trembled uncontrollably. He felt a chill down his spine and could not help but shiver. To me it doesn't matter who it is. The Conquest King, who was riding the divine might wheel, let out a hearty laugh. He was fearless as he stared at the faint silhouettes on the bridge in the distance. His rough face was replaced by excitement. Don't you find it delightful to have a battle with heroic spirits from different eras? The Conquest King's face was filled with excitement as though he had been injected with chicken blood. He nearly jumped up and down. Forget it. I knew that this would be the outcome. In any case, it's up to you. Wilbur Velvet sighed and ignored the Conquest King. There was no need to talk nonsense with a battle maniac. To be honest, be it Archer, Saber, or the 8th heroic spirit, I don't have enough chances of victory. Especially the unfathomable 8th heroic spirit that you mentioned. That fellow's noble artifact is similar to Archer's, but its might and proficiency seems to be even more powerful than Archer's. The Conquest King was vexed. This was the first time he heard that a noble artifact could be used by two people. That fellow must have been sent by the heavens to deliberately go against us. Wilbur Velvet grumbled in frustration. He was filled with complaints about Dustless. This Holy Grail war was ridiculously strange. There had never been an 8th servant. Furthermore, the most unacceptable thing was that the sudden appearance of an 8th heroic spirit could be ignored. Furthermore, it was unbelievably strong. In a 1v1 situation, it was almost invincible. Didn't Toshiomi Inaka say that he wanted to join forces with us? Why didn't you agree to it in the past? Now that that fellow is dead, there's no one to join forces with. Wilbur Velvet's complaints were all directed at the Conquest King. Bang! However, the Conquest King gave him a slap and snapped, "Fool! There can only be one final victor. Sooner or later there will be a time when we part ways." Is he here? The Conquest King sure made an arrogant entrance. However, it's not bad to prepare a funeral for you. After all, we were acquaintances. Looking up at the sky, Dustless had an unfathomable smile on his face. Looking up, one could see lightning flashing and thunder rumbling in the void. Dark clouds were rolling, and the cries of beasts resounded through the starry sky like heavenly thunder, spreading to the ends of the world. A majestic monarch descended like the ruler of the world. The activity coming out of the brain is really scary. Wherever the Conquest King's divine might wheel passed, lightning would streak across. Thick bolts of lightning boomed without restraint, as though they had the power to destroy the world. But then the smile on Dustless's face disappeared and he muttered to himself, "Although flowers are pragmatic and the ending is a bit monotonous, I can still find some good fun. So it's you, the 8th heroic spirit." Boom, boom, boom. The Conquest King's divine might wheel landed on the ground, producing a loud rumble. It carved out a charred trench on the ground and stopped not far in front of Dustless. "Give it your all, Conquest 5. This will be the final battle. Don't disappoint me with your performance." Dustless's hand flashed and a golden greatsword instantly took shape. I couldn't ask for more. The Conquest King laughed out loud when he saw this. He glanced at Web Velvet, indicating for him to get off the carriage and leave. Web Velvet looked at the Conquest King worriedly. After hesitating for a moment, he tactfully left the divine might wheel. After all, he was just a burden. "You won't attack this fellow, right?" The Conquest King asked in a deep voice as he pointed at Web Velvet. "Don't compare me to someone like Wei Gong Qixi, a master who kills his enemies. It's extremely comical. Only someone like Wei Gong Qixi who fears his enemies would be so despicable." Dustless snorted coldly in disdain. His words were filled with endless mockery and disdain. He scoffed at Wei Gong Qixi's methods. Assassinating the opponent's master and forcing Servant to surrender was Wei Gong Qixi's specialty. For example, in the original work, Lancer was tricked to death by Wei Gong Qixi. His master was captured and in the end Lancer was ordered to commit suicide. Before the battle begins, forgive me for speaking bluntly. I have one last question to ask you. If you remain silent, this king will not be able to die in peace. The Conquest King lowered his gaze and stared at Dustless. He did not dare underestimate that thin body of his. He asked in a deep voice, "You seem to have more noble artifacts than Archer. That lightsaber in your hand should be at least A+ grade. My last question is, who are you?" The Conquest King could not hold back his curiosity and asked with anticipation. It was fine to lose, but if he died without knowing who killed him, it would be too tragic. This fellow doesn't know the meaning of curiosity killing the cat. Suddenly recalling a famous saying from his previous life, Dustless's gaze turned complicated. His thoughts turned in reverse. He had lived for hundreds of years, and the number of titles he had been given was too many. Conquest King, it's just a name. Is there a need to be so persistent? Even if you know it's meaningless. Dustless muttered. It would be great if everyone could part on good terms. Asking for a name after death, how boring. Chapter 17:17. Meaningless? No. There's great significance. This question not only perplexed the Conquest King, but also left servant and master perplexed. Dustless's method of existence was too strange and evil. It was beyond everyone's understanding. Dustless clearly did not have any mana at his disposal, but his strength was so astounding that it made everyone's eyes pop. There were even some bored people who spent a lot of time rummaging through all the historical myths, but still could not find a hero that matched Dustless. For example, Yanfeng Kaylee and Toshimi had done so, but they could not find a powerful hero that matched Dustless's identity. Who exactly is this guy? Perhaps only the heavens know. Writer's Conquest King Iskandar was not the only one who was puzzled. In fact, his master, Wilbur Velvet, was also deeply perplexed. Looking at all the myths in the world, there seemed to be no one with abilities comparable to Dustless. There was only Gilgamesh. Although he and Dustless could use the ability of the Gate of Babylon, anyone with a discerning eye could tell that the so-called Gate of Babylon was actually just one of Dustless's many abilities. Is that so? Are you sure you want to know about my past? He glanced at Iskandar, the Conqueror King, in astonishment. His dustless and deep eyes were as terrifying as the abyss. He stared at the Conqueror King for a moment before he said calmly, "Conqueror King, have you heard of the story of Pandora's box?" Pandora's box? The Conquest King was stunned when he heard that. He immediately looked at Dustless in astonishment and frowned. "Are you trying to say that you are also a monster in Pandora's box?" "You can understand it that way." Dustless nodded and immediately smiled. "If you know about my long life, I'm worried that your combat power will decrease. In the past, when I fought with a god, she was in such a situation. Those who know about my past are unable to face me with their full strength." This guy. Wilbur Velvet's brows furrowed deeply when he heard that. A clear Chuan character could not be concealed. This guy is as unfathomable as a god. "Ah. Is your past enough to scare others away?" "Interesting." The Conquest King laughed heartily when he heard this. Following that, he stared at Dustless and said, "That's what makes it interesting. I wish to know of your past even more. It's not just me. Everyone wishes to know of your past. The same goes for Archer. I've already vaguely guessed his identity. The ancient king of Uruk, Gilgamesh, known as the Hero King." What an untactful man. Dustless sighed helplessly and said casually, "I don't have a fixed title. In the past, I was revered as a god and feared as a devil. I destroyed countless worlds, killed countless gods, and created many worlds. If you don't mind, you can be my opponent, a moody and boring god." In the end, Dustless came to such a conclusion. God. I've long been aware of that. The Conquest King was not surprised when he heard that. Instead, the doubts in his heart were relieved. Just as he had said when facing Dustless, the Conquest King had the resolve and determination to challenge a god. In fact, it was not just the Conquest King. The heroic spirits that had fought with Dustless all treated him as a super godlike monster. "That's for the best. Since you aren't attacking, I'll just bully the weak." Dustless revealed a stern gaze. Seeing the Conquest King remain motionless as though he was preparing for something, Dustless took the initiative to transform into a flash of light and pounced at the Conquest King. In fact, the identity of a god was nothing much. For example, the Hero King of Archer, Gilgamesh, had 2/3 of a divinity. He was a heaven-defying existence that was half human and half god. However, compared to Dustless, who had dominated countless eras, Gilgamesh was far inferior. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. In an instant he appeared in front of the Conquest King. Shock flashed across his eyes as he cursed inwardly. "This guy's speed is as fast as teleportation. I can't see any trace of him at all." Even so, the Conquest King still waved his sword in front of him. "Your reflexes are not bad, but your speed is still too slow. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame yourselves for being too sad. The heavens have chosen me to participate in this war, and all of you heroic spirits are destined to be mere foils. Vanish, Conquest King." In the void, Dustless's soft sigh rang out. The light pierced through the Conquest King's body first. Pucci. The golden greatsword left a thick wound on the Conquest King's body. As Dustless used too much strength, he could even see the organs hidden in his body. Pucci. Having suffered an unprecedented injury, Iskandar spat out a mouthful of blood. His face instantly turned as pale as snow, and bean-sized beads of sweat uncontrollably rolled down his coarse face. Despicable guy. Looking down at Dustless, who was much shorter than him, the Conquest King's face was filled with indignation as he said hoarsely, "You are indeed extraordinary. Just a single move was enough to heavily injure me, a king. Am I getting old? My reflexes have become so sluggish that I couldn't even catch your shadow." The Conquest King smiled bitterly. His face was filled with shame and indignation. He never expected Dustless to be so terrifying, especially with his speed. He couldn't even catch a trace of him, and by the time he realized it, he had already been heavily injured by Dustless. Relax and close your eyes. Your opponent is the flash person who ate the flash fruit. His body has turned into light and he can unleash an absolute speed like light. Losing is inevitable. Chapter 17-18. Cough 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 cough. The Conquest King spurted out blood as he looked at the ghastly wound on his chest. A weak smile appeared on his coarse face as he propped himself on the ground with his greatsword to prevent himself from falling. He could not help but lament, "I'm destined to have no fate with the Holy Grail. My dream of conquering the world once again will go down the drain." However, immediately following that, the Conquest King's voice rose several times as all the magic power in his body erupted. The void began to change at an accelerated rate as the area turned into a desert without any warning. So. A cold wind suddenly blew in the pitch-black night sky. The world before his eyes suddenly became much brighter. Large amounts of yellow sand were mixed in with the strong winds that brushed past his shoulders. Is this an inherent enchantment? If I recall correctly, it's called the King's Army. This formation is truly extraordinary. As expected of the invincible army that swept through Europe, Asia and Africa in the past. Dustless nodded his head in praise. The world before his eyes changed as time and space changed. He had arrived at an unfamiliar world. The formation of the world before him was even more exaggerated. There were densely packed figures that were as numerous as locusts. All of them were prostrating on the ground. It was a spectacular sight. Furthermore, all of them were kneeling on one knee as they looked at the Conquest King with deep respect. The soldiers had no regrets in their eyes as they stared death in the face. It was a shock that came from the depths of one's soul. Huff huff huff. Sand danced in the air as he stepped on the barren desert. Dustless was filled with many emotions. The Conquest King's attitude of being as high as the heavens was truly admirable. The sand danced in the air as it was formed from the corpses of his enemies. You're merely a withered willow, yet you're still able to display the scene of a hegemon that leaves one in awe. There's no harm in admitting that you're one of the few kings. Dustless spoke frankly as he looked at the army with indifference. His magnanimous eyes showed no fear. Have victory or defeat will be decided here. The Conquest King rode on a black steed with a shiny mane as he endured the intense pain in his abdomen. He used all his strength to raise the long sword that represented an all-army attack. The enemy is a transcendent being from the universe. He's worlds apart from us mere mortals. But even so, I want him to witness the bravery of my army. Following that, the Conquest King raised his long sword and slashed down. The sword was pointed at Dustless as the deathly still desert began to tremble. Ow 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 ow. The deafening roar deafened everyone. It was like an earthquake. Visible cracks appeared in the desert and gradually spread out. Boom boom boom. The Conquest King and his army charged forward, leaving a mess wherever they went. Due to the terrifying commotion caused by the countless people charging forward, even the desert caved in an exaggerated manner. Unable to withstand the pressure, the desert began to crack. Swish, swish. Countless arrows and spears were fired at the same time, covering the entire sky. There was no way to dodge. The entire desert world was being ravaged by these arrows. Not to mention standing under the sun, even if they were to drill into the ground, they would probably be shot into a hornet's nest. Bang bang bang. Around Dustless, there were all kinds of arrows and spears piled up like a mountain. Enveloped in the golden light, Dustless was unable to penetrate the golden energy defensive wall, no matter how dense the attacks were. Let me show you something interesting. The golden double-faced Consusanu tightly enveloped Dustless. Furthermore, just like Dustless himself, the double-faced Kinsusanu formed the same hand seals as Dustless. Celestial obstruction, quaking star. The somewhat bright void was suddenly covered by a shadow. The strange situation caused the charging army to be stunned. They all raised their heads to look into the depths of the void, including the Conquest King and his soldiers. All of them widened their eyes. The super meteorite that covered the entire army slowly descended. As far as the eye could see, there was only the barren and deathly still meteorite. The entire world had been taken over by it. No wonder this fellow dares to call himself a god. This strength is fully deserving of it. The Conquest King's lips trembled as he looked at the falling meteorite. The battle intent in his heart had completely collapsed. What a joke. Thinking back to how he had been so lawlessly rejoicing in his victory over Dustless, a self-mocking smile appeared on the Conquest King's face. He wished he could find a hole to hide in. This was too embarrassing. Boom, boom, boom. As the meteorite slowly descended, the Conquest King's army suffered a heavy blow. Not only did the army suffer heavy losses, the entire desert world was mercilessly attacked. The meteorite summoned by Dustless had turned it upside down. The conventional astroseismometer was only 2 meteorites, but this time, in order to express his respect for the Conquest King, Dustless had summoned dozens of meteorites. The super meteorites that fell to the ground smashed the desert into smithereens. Ka-ka-ka. With a few crisp sounds, the inherent barrier that the Conquest King had painstakingly constructed shattered like a mirror, returning him to the dark starry sky from before. As for the Conquest King himself, he had long disappeared. He had been buried by the astroseismometer. The Conquest King is also dead. If that's the case, the Holy Grail can appear. Dustless's body landed on the ground as he lowered his head in contemplation. The situation in the original work was the same as it was now. Excluding himself, only Saber and Archer were left. Logically speaking, they did not meet the requirements to summon the Holy Grail, but the Holy Grail had still appeared unexpectedly. This is bad. Alice Fair is the vessel of the Holy Grail. Suddenly thinking of the most thorny problem, Dustless could not help but raise his eyebrows. Should he kill Alice Fair with his own hands? He could not do such a thing. At the same time, Alice Fair was an indispensable vessel. Let's wait for the time being. After pondering for a while, Dustless could not make up his mind. Alice Fair had treated him quite well. Both of them were flesh and blood. It was impossible and unrealistic for him to cut her off so easily. Chapter 17-19. As for Web Velvet, Dustless completely ignored him. Whether he killed him or not, it did not change anything. Furthermore, he had previously promised Conquest King to spare him. Inside the Irinsbellen family's castle. Just after Dustless left, 2 uninvited guests arrived. One of them was the Hero King, who was covered in sparkling gold, and the other was the new master of sparkling gold, Yenfengili. Furthermore, the Hero King and Yenfengili had engaged in an intense battle with Saber and Wei Gong Kisi. The development was identical to the original work. Although Saber had tried her best to fight the Hero King, with the battle nearly destroying the Irinsbellen family's castle, there was still a huge gap in strength. Spare was ultimately suppressed. If Saber had Avalon, she might have barely been able to put up a fight with Sparkling Gold. She might even have been able to defeat the Hero King, but the chances of relying on Excalibur to defeat the Hero King were 0. The outcome was still a tragic defeat for Saber. While retreating, Sparkling Gold had even stabbed Wei Gong Kisi, worsening his injuries. He could die at any moment. Furthermore, he could no longer provide magic power to Saber. Wei Gong Kisi could not even protect himself. Other than that, there was another terrible matter. Alice Fair had been captured. Those 2 bastards sure know how to pick the time. While I was challenging Ryder, they actually took the initiative to sneak attack the Irinsbellen family's castle. I was the one who was careless. I thought that the Hero King would not stoop to such despicable acts of sneak attacks. I overestimated him. In the ruins of the Irinsbellen family's castle, the majestic castle of the past had vanished into thin air. It was completely reduced to history. In a dilapidated room that could barely provide shelter from the elements, Saber was lying in bed with a pale face. And in another room, Wei Gong Kisi was in the same state. His situation was worse than Saber's. He had been beaten up by Yenfengili and had been dealt the final blow by the Hero King. His body was on the brink of collapse. Now there were only 4 people who could still move: Kwai Enosaka, Rin Enosaka, Sakuratama, and Dustless. Dustless was sitting on the sofa, rubbing his temples in distress. His mind was in a dead end and all the bad things were overlapping. His head was dizzy and he had a slight headache. Instead of sitting here doing nothing, why don't you hurry up and save Alice Field? A crisp child's voice rang out. Dustless looked up and saw Rin Enbin with his hands on his hips. What does a kid know? Dustless rolled his eyes. I really don't understand why Sister Alice Field didn't activate the command seal. That way I could have asked for your help, Rin Enbin muttered to himself in confusion. That's because the command incantation is useless against me. It's too difficult to bind me. Dustless shook his head. The source of the command incantation was actually the Great Holy Grail. Everything had its own limit. It was too difficult for a mere command seal to bind him. Alice Field's command incantation seemed to be able to control Dustless, but in reality, it was just a facade. Just like how Dustless didn't need Alice Field's magic, the two had nothing to do with each other. Even if Alice Field activated the command incantation, Dustless wouldn't be affected, let alone control him. Dustless, Rin's words make sense. Archer is harmful to Alice Field. If you don't save her, your heroic spirit won't be able to bear the consequences. Your body will disappear in a few days. Saber suddenly opened her eyes. Her voice was as soft as a mosquito's buzz. She was very tired. Dustless used Mokuton to heal her wounds. It was enough to show how fierce the battle with Archer was. It's useless. Just now, I already felt that the vague practice with Alice Field was cut off. I'm afraid that Alice Field has been killed. I guess she has now become the carrier of the Holy Grail. Dustless said calmly. He could feel that the inextricable relationship with Alice Field was cut off in an instant. Bang! Saber smashed the quilt excitedly and whispered unwillingly, "Did we lose just like that? It's really unpleasant to lose to that guy." "No, it's not over yet." Dustless shook his head mysteriously. "So what if Alice Field is dead?" In fact, after hearing that Alice Field was captured, Dustless's complicated thoughts were as calm as water. In this way he could end Alice Field's miserable fate. After the Holy Grail War was over, he could use Outer Path, reincarnation innate technique to resurrect her. Both of us are about to be eliminated. Cutter is heavily injured and it's too difficult to continue fighting. The mana he provides me is very little, and I'm seriously exhausted from the battle with Archer. I can feel that I will disappear soon. Spare's face was filled with loneliness and desolation. This was the first time she tasted defeat. "We didn't lose," Dustless said, and then stared at Saber with his eyes like torches. "You can devour my soul. That way you can continue to maintain your body and your mana will be increased." Souls were the nourishment of Sarvant. The mana loss could be made up through souls. Of course, there was also a method called mana replenishment, but Dustless was too embarrassed to say it. "Devour your soul?" "Absolutely not." Saber heard that and felt warm in her heart. She gave a grateful look, but she still refused firmly. "Sorry, I can't do that." "You're really stubborn." Dustless shook his head again. "So what if she devoured his soul?" Dustless was quite confident in his soul. Not to mention that he had the body of a real 10-tailed beast. When he was in the Grim Reaper world, he had devoured a large number of souls. Not only that, he had also devoured the Soul King, which was the amalgamation of souls. Dustless's soul was almost infinite. Even if he was devoured by Saber, it did not matter. After all, he was backed by the sea and his soul was inexhaustible. Chapter 17:20. You can't even hold on anymore, yet you want me to devour your soul. Saber did not know whether to laugh or cry. Dustless's master Alice Fair had already fallen. As a Sarvant, he would disappear sooner or later. What soul was there left for Saber to devour? "That's not a problem. Don't worry. I'm sure you've noticed that my way of existence is a little special. I don't need magic to maintain myself. Even if my master dies, my body will not disappear." Dustless said calmly. This was the advantage of being a traveler. "That does seem to be the case. You've not been using magic all this time. It's a special power that I've never seen before." Saber remained silent. To be honest, she had thought about Dustless' way of existence before. It was indeed strange and unique. He did not need to use magic at all. His attacks were also completely different from magic. The two had nothing to do with each other. Is that really okay? What if something unexpected happens? Even if you regret it, it'll be too late. Saber's tone was high, and her haggard face was solemn as she reminded him. If I die just because someone absorbs some of my soul, then I can only blame myself for being unlucky. Dustless was all smiles. His casual tone was full of confidence. Phew. I really don't understand what you're thinking. Since you've decided to do this, I won't hold back. Saber saw Dustless's determined gaze and did not want to waste any more time. Saber was not the kind of person who would waste time. Especially now that she was pressed for time, there was no time for her to hesitate. Can you guys leave first? Saber looked awkwardly at Akui Enosaka, Rin Enosaka, and her mother. Saber's voice was very soft. It was rare for her to be so shy. The weirdest thing was that Saber's face was flushed. Hey, are you trying to take advantage of her? You're using such a shameless method to help Saber recover her magic. That's despicable. A disdainful voice suddenly sounded. Dustless turned his head and saw the mischievous Rin Enosaka. She was staring at him with an ambiguous expression. Isn't it just devouring a soul? What's there to be embarrassed about? Besides, we're all heroic spirits, so there's no need to be so alarmed. Dustless didn't even think about it and asked without hesitation, also, quickly put away your wretched eyes. Dustless was inwardly puzzled. Although Rin Enosaka was only a few years old, his thoughts were truly unflattering. You'll know soon enough. Rin Enosaka patted Dustless's shoulder with an expression that said, take care of yourself. Then he left in high spirits. Rin Enosaka wasn't the only one who had a strange expression on his face. Even Kue Enosaka had the same expression. Did I make a mistake somewhere? Noticing that everyone was looking at him strangely, Dustless lowered his head and asked himself. His knowledge of magic was pitifully little. Even a brat like Rin Enbin knew more than him. Dustless only knew that there were two ways to recover one's mana. One was to replenish one's mana, and the other was to devour other people's souls. Bang! With a dull thud, only Dustless and Saber were left in the spacious room. Saber suddenly sat down beside Dustless. Her face was flushed red and she was abnormally shy. Is there something wrong? Saber. Seeing this, Dustless couldn't help but ask loudly, it's just absorbing souls, it's not like... Dustless almost blurted out the words replenishing mana, but at the crucial moment he quickly stopped himself. Don't you know the exact process? This time it was Saber's turn to be shocked. She stared into Dustless's eyes, her clear eyes unreadable. In a trance, she seemed to be able to see through Dustless's mind. It doesn't look like you're lying. Saber gritted her teeth and took advantage of Dustless's carelessness to push him down, her entire body lying on top of Dustless's body. Plop. Caught off guard, Dustless was pressed to the ground. He stared blankly at Saber. He didn't expect her to suddenly attack him. Staring at the red lips so close to his, he seemed to have understood something. No wonder Ling and the others made such expressions. So this is how Saber wants to absorb my soul. No wonder she's so embarrassed. Dustless suddenly understood. If he guessed correctly, Saber might be absorbing his soul through mouth-to-mouth contact. Closing her eyes, Saber endured the discomfort in her body and sealed Dustless's mouth. Soft. Tastes good. Dustless's mind was in a daze. He didn't expect Saber to counterattack. At the same time, he felt a strange force enter his body from Saber's mouth. It didn't have a physical body and it was invisible to the touch, but it was real. It kept pulling at his mind and devouring the majestic soul in Dustless's body. This guy is really a freak. After about 10 seconds, Saber's eyes widened as she stared at Dustless, who was lying flat on the bed. At first she was only absorbing Dustless's soul slightly, but later she was shocked to find that the boundless soul was vast and boundless. Saber finally understood what Dustless meant when he said that no matter how much water one took from the sea, there was an endless supply. She worked harder to suck Dustless's mouth and Saber's mana was quickly restored. Chapter 1721. The mana in Saber's body was quickly recovering, and it was increasing rapidly. Her original mana had recovered and it even showed signs of reaching its peak. Saber's complexion also recovered, and her pale face flashed with a healthy redness. After a long time, Dustless and Saab finally parted their lips. No, you can't be a heroic spirit. You have such a terrifying soul. Even if you devoured the souls of all the humans in the world, you still wouldn't be able to reach such a level. Dustless, I'm getting more and more curious about your background. You really are an enigma. Saber, you're already a heroic spirit. Why do you care about your past life? Let go of those trivial matters. Even if you know about my background, it won't do you any good. In short, if I get the Holy Grail, I'll give it to you. Dustless moved a little and took a few deep breaths. When Saber suddenly covered his mouth just now, he almost suffocated. Is there something wrong with my ears? Are you planning to give me the Holy Grail to fulfill my wish? Saber sighed, and there was a rare hint of bitterness in her voice. Dustless, I always feel like you're hiding a lot of secrets from me. As allies, we should know each other well. How fragrant. But then again, I'm the one who's at a disadvantage. A look of infatuation flashed across Saber's face. Wuqian's careless words made Saber embarrassed. Your attitude and appearance are a little different. However, Saber did not get angry. Instead, she pouted like a little girl and continued to complain. Compared to an ordinary woman, I prefer you to treat me like a servant. Cough, cough, cough. Hearing this, Dustless coughed twice and stared at the cheap red Saber. He couldn't help but lament. Saber, your side as a knight is very charming, but as a woman, it's also like a soul-sucking poison. Thank you for your compliment, but I really can't feel happy about it. Saber was unmoved. There was not even a ripple on her face. She was very calm. From the moment she pulled out the sword in the stone, she had forgotten that she was a woman. Now it's about time to find trouble with Gold Shinny. Dustless stood up and stretched his body. A sinister look flashed across his eyes. Golden glitter? Are you talking about Archer? After Saber was taken aback, her fair chin gently nodded a few times. She suddenly recalled the gorgeous attire of the Hero King. He was definitely worthy of the title of Golden Twinkle. At this moment, in another direction. Is this the Holy Grail? It's different from what I imagined. The Hero King and Yen Fengili stood side by side. The former looked at the golden Holy Grail in front of him with disappointment. It was embedded with all kinds of gorgeous and resplendent gems. Furthermore, a crimson liquid similar to fresh blood was flowing out of the Holy Grail. However, the Hero King and Yen Fengili's performances were mediocre. The two of them did not feel much as they looked at the Holy Grail that was filled with liquid. Not only were they not happy, they even felt somewhat defeated. Especially the Hero King, who had a bored expression. I don't care about this disgusting thing. Even if I have it in my collection, I will throw it into the trash. The Hero King's tone was filled with disdain towards the Holy Grail that everyone yearned for. Yen Fengili was the same. He looked at the Holy Grail calmly. He was not happy, but if he was disappointed, there was also a faint joy. It was quite contradictory. Ah, so this is what the Holy Grail looks like. This disgusting smell. Is it all from the liquid in the Holy Grail? An indifferent voice descended from the sky. A ray of light flashed in the void. Looking up, they saw Dustless hugging Spare as bright as a shooting star. They looked at the mysterious black liquid with curiosity. It looked like black mud and was filled with the smell of blood. To be honest, the smell was really uncomfortable. It was the complete opposite of the legendary universal wishing machine, the Holy Grail. In most people's eyes, the Holy Grail was a holy and noble existence like an angel. This bastard. He actually dared to hug her without my permission. Completely ignoring the Holy Grail, the Hero King looked up at the sky. When he saw Dustless hugging Saber, his blood-red eyes immediately flashed with a ferocious shock wave. All this while, the Hero King had treated Saber as his exclusive property. Although he had never said it out loud, he had subconsciously taken Saber for himself, believing that she was his possession. Now his possession was being held by someone else, and it was an enemy he found most displeasing to the eye. The Hero King's pride immediately shattered to the ground. Is this guy really the Hero King? Is he really the oldest Hero King of humanity? With such a narrow-minded mindset, his character is also unflattering. Dustless's line of sight happened to see the gloomy Archer, the Hero King. The flames in his blood-red gemstone eyes burned fiercely. Dustless naturally knew what this guy was thinking. The Hero King's fragile pride had once again been dealt a heavy blow by Dustless and Saber's public display of affection. It was a mental blow that could not be ignored. After all, Dustless was hugging Saber. The two of them flying through the void gave off a romantic feeling. They were like a celestial couple, extremely intimate and harmonious. and Saber was like a little bird leaning on Dustless's chest. The majestic Night King of the past was like an obedient little girl. Chapter 1722. A few seconds later, Dustless and Saber also landed on the ground. As for Wei Gong Qixi, he was also on his way here. Seeing that the Holy Grail War was about to end, Wei Gong Qixi naturally did not want the Holy Grail to be taken by someone else first. Therefore this guy forced himself to endure the bleeding wound and slowly rushed over. The two of you sure know how to put on airs. The Hero King's body shimmered as he stared at Saber, who was hugging Dustless. Unable to vent his anger, he clenched his fists and roared, "Regardless of what happens today, 8th heroic spirit, you must die here for this king." Why does this fellow look like he ate gunpowder? Did someone offend him? Saber frowned and looked up, only to see Archer's face as dark as a black pot. Who offended him? Of course it was. Dustless curled his lips and looked down on the petty Hero King. Even though he was known as the most ancient king, humanity's oldest super king, and looked down on all life like a god, the Hero King's attitude was truly unflattering. Upon seeing this scene, the Hero King's eyes widened. The suppressed flames in his heart could no longer remain dormant. Just as he was about to reprimand Dustless suddenly did something even more overboard. "Hero King, your attitude is as puny as a worm." Dustless mocked in an eccentric manner. He looked down on the so-called most ancient king. "It's not up to you to point fingers at me. Stay away from Saber. That belongs to the king." A scream that sounded like a pig being slaughtered resounded through the void. The Hero King was enraged as he nearly exploded. His face was burning red as veins protruded on his forehead. Gilgamesh seems a little off. Could it be that he has feelings for Saber? What a joke. Isn't this fellow a heroic spirit? Yen Feng Qili looked oddly at the Hero King before looking at Dustless and Saber. Suddenly he came to a realization and could not help but pity the Hero King. He sighed and said, "This is just fancy dog abuse. By agitating Archer like this, you will completely offend him." Saber was at a loss whether to laugh or cry at Dustless's thoughts. It was as though the angrier the Hero King was, the happier he was. "Since we are mortal enemies, even if I don't agitate the Hero King, this bastard will still kill us all." This was the Holy Grail War. Only one saint would be enough. Everyone else could just die. This is called a psychological blow. Look at how the bastard, the Hero King, is stamping with rage. Who knows if that bastard will faint from the anger. When that happens, we can subdue him without a fight. Dustless laughed heartily as he ignored the Hero King's constipated expression. This guy, why is he so angry? Saber also noticed the odd expression on the Hero King's face. Immediately she wore an odd expression. He could not figure out why this bastard was so angry. It felt like his wife had been snatched away by Dustless. "Since you wish to suffer this king's wrath so much, I'll grant you your wish." "Darn bastard." The infuriated Hero King exploded. With a wave of his hand, the void was filled with countless golden beams of light. Immediately following that, countless divine weapons appeared. Shoo, thu, thu. A dense barrage of attacks came pouring down as cold beams filled the void. Accompanied by the Hero King's rage, the number reached a level that left one in despair. "Ignorant fool, aren't you embarrassed to take out such a thing to embarrass yourself? Hurry up and pull out your e. If you cause a huge commotion and I kill you, I'll be embarrassed." Raising his head to scan the various weapons floating above the Hero King's head, Dustless was as calm as a breeze. He was unperturbed. Following that, he gently raised his right arm and flicked out a beam of light from his finger. Binding Dao's 81. Space shattering. A transparent barrier instantly appeared. It was as thin as a cicada's wing, not even as thick as a fingernail. "You wish to use such a thing to resist this king's attack? Do you think I'm trash like Lancer and Berserker? This is blasphemy to this king. Bastard." The Hero King bellowed angrily. He was pissed off by Dustless's pathetic look. He even felt nauseous as he felt uncomfortable all over. "Who the hell needs your pity?" Boom. Boom. The densely packed noble artifacts all crashed onto the enchantment. The continuous attacks were like a tidal wave, constantly destroying the seemingly weak enchantment that could not withstand a single blow from the sky-severing barrier. "It won't shatter, right?" Saber was rather nervous. Once the barrier was shattered, she and Dustless would probably be riddled with holes by the enraged Hero King. Boom, boom, boom. The barrage of attacks continued. There were more than 1,000 treasures that shot out from the gate of Babylon, but what was shocking was that no matter how many attacks they launched, they failed to tear apart Dustless's space-shattering barrier. How boring. Didn't I say before that as long as you pull out your yay, the might will be enough to tear apart this barrier? Dustless's tone suddenly paused as he pointed at the golden treasures that littered the ground and advised, "It's best you pick up such fancy moves while it's still early." Did this darn bastard say that on purpose? The Hero King was so angry that his hair stood on end. If Dustless had not said that, it would have been fine. There was nothing wrong with him taking out his EA, but now if he were to take out his EA according to Dustless's wishes, his reputation as the Hero King would be completely ruined. "Do you think I'll take it out just because you say so? You aren't worthy." The Hero King cupped his fists and snorted coldly. He waved his hand once again as the golden light above his head shot out a large number of weapons once again. With a momentum that could topple mountains and overturn seas, they came crashing down on Dustless and Saber. "You don't appreciate my kind advice at all." Dustless could not help but shake his head when he saw the situation. He leisurely snapped his fingers and with a pause sound, large ripples appeared in the void. It was as though they had suddenly appeared around the sun. The blinding light was scorching and blinding. Of course, Gilgamesh's face turned green. Chapter 1723. There was only one user of the King's Babylon in the past, Hero King Gilgamesh. But now things were different. There was a brand new user and his proficiency and control was something even the original user, the Hero King, could not match. After all, Dustless had been using the King's Babylon for centuries. In terms of time, it far exceeded the Hero King's, so it was reasonable for his attainment to be above his. Hum. 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 Above Dustless's head, a resplendent beam of light with a domineering aura flashed. It was roughly the same as the golden beam above the Hero King's head. They were suffused with an ancient and desolate aura. "Today I'll finish you off completely, you imposter." Dustless's thin arm waved gently as all sorts of enviable treasures surged out. Without exception, they were all peerless divine artifacts. "Darn bastard, you are clearly the imposter, yet you are slandering me?" The Hero King flew into a rage when he heard this. He was the most ancient king. Back when there was only one world, one person had once obtained all the treasures in the world. Everything in the world belonged to this king. He was the Hero King of ancient Uruk, Gilgamesh. Now, as the true Hero King, Gilgamesh felt aggrieved when Dustless accused him of being an imposter. These two bastards. Saber was abnormally speechless. The Hero King had a large number of treasures above his head and so did Dustless. There were all sorts of treasures that left people dazzled, envious and hateful. Ignoring others, even Saber herself felt jealous. Dustless and the Hero King could even take out the original form of Excalibur. The one who suffered the greatest blow from this clash was not the Hero King but Saber. Watching the two tycoons battle and seeing them take out all sorts of legendary treasures made her feel sad. "Crush him. Disappear, you eyesore of gold." Dustless and the Hero King waved their hands at the same time as the large number of treasures gathered on their foreheads shot out without leaving a single one behind. Boom, boom, boom. High up in the sky, hundreds of treasures began to clash. The scene was spectacular as resplendent sparks flashed incessantly. Both sides destroyed each other's treasures as the ground was filled with metal debris. "What kind of joke is this? Why would I lose to such an imposter?" The Hero King stared intently at the debris on the ground as he looked at the indifferent Dustless. He revealed a look of shock. Their treasured artifacts continued clashing, but anyone with a discerning eye could tell that Dustless was superior. Compared to the Hero King who was aimlessly venting the flames in his heart, Dustless's usage was much more ingenious. The treasure artifact that the Hero King shot out from the king's treasure was once again shattered by the treasure artifact under Dustless's control, reducing it to metal scraps that filled the ground. "Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! Shoo!" No one would be able to accept losing to a person he hated the most in a domain he was best at. It was absolutely intolerable, much less the Hero King who thought highly of himself. Heavenlock. Shoo. A strange-looking chain drilled out of the void as it dodged the oncoming treasures. Like a venomous snake, it went straight for Dustless. If you are caught by Heavenlock, you are definitely dead. The Hero King's blood-red eyes churned with bloodlust as his face suffused a ruthless and ferocious look. He made up his mind that the moment he captured Wuxian, he would immediately brandish his saber to finish off the eyesore. Shoo. Is this guy going easy on me? Does he think I'm not his match? Not only did the Hero King not rejoice when he saw this, his eyebrows pricked up as he wondered, is this guy doing this on purpose? Is he looking down on me? Compared to Ye, I actually trust Heavenlock more. Ka. Just as he planned on continuing his verbal assault on Dustless, the Hero King was smacked in the face. He felt a burning pain as a crack appeared in the heavenly lock that could not be unlocked. Even the god of Heavenlock can't break free? Don't be so full of yourself. No matter what kind of attack it is, it has a limit. If it exceeds that limit, then any wonderful move will collapse on its own. The heavenly lock actually shattered. How is this possible? The heavenly lock is used as a divine rule. The higher the divinity of the captive, the harder the chain will be, and the harder it will be to break free. The Hero King's face was ashen as though he had eaten a fly. It was extremely cheap and fascinating. No matter how much he thought about it, he never imagined that Dustless would be able to shatter the heaven lock so easily. The process was as simple and easy as eating and drinking. Chapter 1724. It was no wonder the Hero King would reveal such a bitter expression. To him, the heavenly lock had always been successful. Ordinary people could only dream of escaping the heavenly lock's shackles, much less destroy it. But now Dustless had done it. And it was so simple. Unforgivable. The Hero King was enraged as he locked his gaze onto Dustless. His blood-red eyes protruded outwards, giving off a feeling of horror that was about to burst out of his eye sockets. You don't seem to have heard what I said before. Sweeping a glance at the Hero King who was about to go berserk, Dustless knew that what he had said before was nonsense. It was best to continue fighting. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. His body transformed into a formless beam of light as he instantly appeared in front of the Hero King. Heavenly Gathering Cloud Sword. Light swirled in his hand as a divine sword that could slice through metal like mud flashed. What fast speed! Turning his head, the Hero King was alarmed. Although he was unable to capture Dustless's speed, and he did not even have the time to react, his natural sense of danger and intuition had sensed the impending danger. Without a second thought, the Hero King dodged and retreated. Too slow. Dustless shot forward with his sword in hand. Like a shadow, he appeared in front of the Hero King in a split second. Under the latter's horrified gaze, the heavenly gathering cloud sword swept out. Puchi. Blood splattered out of the void as a glaring mark appeared on the Hero King's gorgeous armor. The defensive armor was pulverized and one could see the skin that had been sliced apart. How dare you, Shu. However, Dustless did not give the Hero King a chance to speak any more nonsense. The Glint Fruit's powers were activated once again as a straight beam of light stopped above the Hero King's forehead. Oh good. Seeing the flash above his head, the Hero King's pupils constricted. The space behind him produced a ripple once again as the sharp gemstone sword was unsheathed. The Hero King had an abnormally ferocious expression as he slashed at Dustless's waist. His strength was raised to the limits of his life. From the looks of it, he planned on slicing Dustless in half. Naive. Dustless's dry lips curled into a contemptuous smile. His pupils spun as his eye powers blasted out. Immediately following that, the corners of his mouth opened slightly as he spat out two simple words. Immediately he resolved the Hero King's fatal attack. Divine Might. A slight ripple of energy appeared in the sky and a tiny vortex appeared. Dustless's abdomen throbbed inexplicably and in an instant, it lost its substance. Puchi. The broadsword's beam penetrated Dustless's body. The Hero King was overjoyed as he stared at the wound in anticipation. He thought that it would be a beautiful scene of him being sliced in half. To everyone's surprise, the sensation that came from his hand left the Hero King in a daze. He had clearly struck Dustless's body, but the feeling he got was like a sword sweeping across invisible air. It was completely useless. Dustless's body seemed to suddenly turn incorporeal as he vanished without a trace. Lightspeed kick. Taking advantage of the Hero King's moment of carelessness, Dustless's tiny foot, which was covered in light, struck him with all its might. Boom, boom, boom. A flaming mushroom cloud rose from the Hero King's body as he was sent flying hundreds of meters away by Dustless's kick. His shining armor lost its luster as it was charred black. Not only that, certain parts of his body could not withstand the force of the explosion as they caved in. Ah ah ah, a roar that caused one's body to tremble rang out. Those who were touched by the sound wave all retreated, their hearts trembling in fear from that furious roar. Kill you. I have to kill you. I have to tear you to pieces. A neurotic and sharp roar came out of the Hero King's throat. On a closer look, his body was severely charred. His head of golden hair had been ignited by Dustless's light-speed kick, burning him to a crisp. Since you want to die so much, I'll grant you your wish. The Hero King was completely enraged. The space around his right hand produced a ripple as a golden circle appeared. Following that, a strange-looking spiral weapon slowly emerged. Is it he? Finally decided to get serious. Dustless nodded slightly when he saw the situation. Following that, a teasing and playful look flashed across his face. Focusing on the Hero King who was about to go berserk, Dustless suddenly shouted, "Heaven Lock!" In the void, a series of massive chains shot out as they wantonly danced. This time the user of the Heaven Lock and the target of the attack had changed. The person who cast the spell had become Dustless, while the target of the attack had become the Hero King. It was the exact opposite of the previous outcome. "Scram, you hateful thing!" The Hero King roared as a large number of treasures shot out from the void behind him, destroying the Heaven Lock that was attacking him. Dustless laughed sinisterly in his heart as his gaze landed on the Hero King's feet. Ka. The ground beneath his feet suddenly exploded. The Hero King, who realized the danger, retreated in a flash, but it was too late. The golden chains that had been prepared for a long time instantly captured him. This is... The Hero King stared intently at the chains that wrapped around him. This was the first time in his life that he had a look of despair. He said helplessly, "It's actually the Heaven Lock. I'm screwed." As the owner of the Heaven Lock, the Hero King naturally knew how terrifying the Heaven Lock was. To ordinary humans, the Heaven Lock was just a sturdy chain without anything special. But if the target was a god, the problem would be terrible. The Heaven Lock was a weapon against gods. To put it simply, it was meant to punish gods. It was of little use against mortals. And the Hero King happened to possess 2/3 of the divine spark, so the threat the Heaven Lock posed to him was absolutely fatal. Chapter 1725. Although the Hero King was powerful, he was similarly helpless against his own noble artifact. All he could do was stare helplessly at the glaring chains. Suddenly he found the Heaven Lock extremely disgusting. The Hero King could not help but feel nauseous as he vomited. "Hero King, although you are powerful, you do not have any immunity against your own noble artifact, right? Especially as a demigod, it's impossible for you to resist the Heaven Lock." Dustless chuckled in schadenfreude. The uniqueness of the Heaven Lock lay in this. To gods, it was extremely lethal, but to ordinary humans, it was just an ordinary chain. And the Hero King happened to have 2/3 of the divine spark. Hence, the Heaven Lock's restraint on him was multiplied. Damn it! The Hero King was like a hooligan as he cursed incessantly. Looking at the chains that were tightly wrapped around his left arm, he suddenly felt a sense of mockery. His face turned purple from anger. The Hero King never dreamed that he would fall at the hands of Heaven Shackles. Heaven Shackles were often used by the Hero King to punish others, but he never expected that Dustless would use Heaven Shackles to punish him. How dare he? Then I'll use the A to tear you apart. After struggling with all his might, the Hero King helplessly realized that he had no way of escaping the Heaven Lock. It was as though he had met his nemesis. The greater his strength, the harder the Heaven Lock became. "You plan on using the parting sword K to tear me apart? Are you sure you can do it?" A deep smile flashed across Dustless's face. With a gentle wave of his right hand, a strange sword that looked identical to the parting sword in the Hero King's hand appeared in Dustless's palm. "This fellow can also use the parting sword." The Hero King's arrogant eyes flashed a look of caution. He knew the strength of his noble artifact like the back of his hand. If he was unlucky, he might really be reduced to ashes by the terrifying power of the parting sword. After all, the parting sword was known as a sword that could destroy the world. Saber. Suddenly, Dustless looked at the distant saber and reminded her, instead of watching me battle with this shiny gold, why don't you take the opportunity to snatch the sacred grail? After being reminded by Dustless, Saber, who had been watching the battle, came back to her senses. The scene of Dustless crushing Gold Sparkly was so satisfying that Saber was momentarily dazed. Seeing Golden Twinkle being brutally beaten up by Dustless, especially being burned to a crisp by Dustless, with his hair charred, turning the Hero King into a bald head, Saber felt a sense of relief. Even Yen Feng Qili was looked down upon beyond the clouds. Is it that funny? I hope the two of you can still laugh later. The Hero King's cold gaze swept back and forth. It was as bone-piercing as an icy blade. Anyone who met his tyrannical gaze would feel a prickling pain and discomfort on their skin. Have a taste of my wrath. An arrogant smile suffused the Hero King's face as he caressed obedient parting sword. He stared at Dustless in a cool and awesome manner. Instantly he found immense confidence. Ka ka ka. The obedient parting sword began spinning rapidly as a red spiral halo burst out. The relatively calm sky immediately stirred with a biting cold wind. Not only that, the void began to crack visibly. Then let's see who's stronger. Dustless smiled faintly when he saw this. The obedient parting sword in his hand began spinning rapidly as an extremely destructive and sharp wind wave blasted out. Enuma Elish. The Hero King, who was the first to lose his cool, launched an attack as a dense energy ripple surged over. The surrounding void was instantly obliterated. Hehe, Hero King. You shout with such grandeur. You don't look too bad on the surface. Dustless chuckled as he looked at the incoming red vortex. Space began to slowly disintegrate. Dustless threw out obedient parting sword in his hand. Annihilate him. Compared to the sonorous and valiant Hero King, Dustless's tone was a lot more ordinary. Boom, boom, boom. The two violent energy ripples collided, causing the void to tremble violently. The two forces that were in a stalemate struggled against each other, and the violent impact that erupted shattered the surrounding space. That's all there is to it. Looking at the deadlocked energy ripples, the Hero King suddenly laughed happily. He had always been crushed by Dustless. Even a genuine Hero King like him had been called a fake. Now he had finally regained some of his confidence. No, you've lost. Gently lifting his eyelids to glance at the Hero King, Dustless's mind stirred slightly as Celestial Lock pulled the Hero King over. He approached the area where the two obedient parting swords were clashing. Puchi, Puchi, Puchi. Under the influence of the powerful energy ripples, the Hero King's body began to gradually collapse. This bastard plans on using the shockwaves from the obedient parting sword to finish me off? How can I let you do as you wish? The Hero King clenched his teeth as he understood Dustless's true intentions. He took the initiative to distance himself from the massive energy ripples. Just the powerful energy ripples from the clash of the two obedient parting swords was enough to vanquish the Hero King. And at that moment, a jaw-dropping turn of events happened. It disrupted the ending that was about to come to an end. Saber, I'm now using a command curse to order you to immediately give up your plans on the Holy Grail. Begin attacking that man Dustless. Join forces with Archer to finish him off. The sudden order froze the scene as everyone stared in shock at the panting figure. Kisi, are you sick? Why would you give such a stupid order? Seeing that the Holy Grail was about to be hers, Saber's limbs immediately lost control. With her sword in hand, she turned around and slowly walked towards Dustless. Sorry Saber, there's only one Holy Grail and it only has one owner, Wei Gong Kisi. So it's best you join forces with the Hero King to kill Dustless. Chapter 1726. This guy is really vicious. Dustless stared deeply at Wei Gong Kisi. He did not expect him to be so shameless. Wei Gong Kisi, you ungrateful thing. Don't you know who helped you obtain the Holy Grail? Now you want to kill the donkey after it has outlived its usefulness? You are really despicable. Without waiting for Dustless to speak, Saber angrily reprimanded loudly, You want me and Dustless to kill each other so that no one can stop you from obtaining the Holy Grail. Is this your goal? As Wei Gong Kisi used the power of the command curse, Saber could not resist at all. Her body uncontrollably walked towards Dustless. You are too naive, Saber. The Hero King glanced at Saber and said indifferently, in the so-called Holy Grail War, there is only one true saint. This person is definitely not one of us heroic spirits. That's right. The so-called heroic spirits are just tools used to kill. Wei Gong Qixi added without any guilt. Come and fulfill my wish. Holy Grail. Wei Gong Qixi's eyes turned fanatical as he stared at the liquid overflowing from the Holy Grail. You want to obtain the Holy Grail? I will definitely not allow it. You better *ck off. I need to use the Holy Grail to solve my doubts. Yan Feng Qixi stared at Wei Gong Qixi unkindly. He stood in front of him like a wall. His hands were clenched tightly as he got into an attacking stance. Heh. You are Dustless, right? Fate is really cruel. Looking at Dustless's calm face, the Hero King laughed maniacally. Things in this world are just so bizarre. A second ago we were allies who treated each other with sincerity. Now we are enemies. Sorry, Dustless. My body is out of control. Saber was sweating profusely. Her body could not resist the command of Wei Gong Qixi's command curse. There is no need to apologize. The final outcome between heroic spirits is always like this: killing. Dustless did not mind. After all, there was only one owner of the Holy Grail. Your inexplicable confidence is really annoying. The Hero King raised his voice as he looked at Dustless with extreme displeasure. Alright, I might as well admit that you are very strong. You are so strong that I can't deal with you alone. However, with two kings attacking simultaneously, I do not understand what gives you the confidence to deal with us. No, Gilgamesh. From the beginning to the end, I only have one enemy. The so-called two kings besieging me is just your wishful thinking. Dustless shook his finger. Do you think Saber is on the same side as you? Don't be naive. The Hero King curled his lips and said with a sneer, just now Saber's master used the command hex to give the command. You must have heard the content very clearly. Destroy Dustless. Idiot. Upon seeing this, Dustless revealed a hopeless expression. Noticing that he could not communicate with the Hero King normally, he immediately took action. Swish, swish. The golden flash swept out and pounced straight at Gilgamesh. Quickly leave, Dustless. Saber warned him loudly. She was filled with hatred for Wei Gong Qixi. Dustless had helped her numerous times, and if not for Dustless contributing his soul to raise her demonic powers, Saber might have already vanished. Looking up, he saw Saber raise Excalibur. Furthermore, it was covered in a large amount of destructive golden light. An extremely oppressive and powerful slash enveloped Dustless. Swish, swish. However, Dustless, who had transformed into a flash of light, ignored it. He continued charging straight for the Hero King. Boom, boom, boom. Even though Saber did not wish to use her slash, due to the command hex's command, a massive beam of light swept out. It was about to swallow Dustless whole. Boom, boom, boom. The golden slash tore through the thistles and thorns as it headed straight for Dustless to devour. A good opportunity. Upon seeing this, the Hero King's eyes lit up. The obedient parting sword in his hand began spinning at high speeds once again. A red vortex of energy ripples burst out. What a miracle. The Hero King and the Night King, these two archenemies, actually joined forces one day. Dustless could not help but find it laughable. As everyone knew, Saber and Archer were archenemies. The two of them could be said to be natural enemies. The two of them had fought fiercely during the two Holy Grail Wars. Now they had actually joined forces to deal with him. Dustless felt that the world was unpredictable. Both of you are famous figures in history. Then let me be a little more serious. With his gaze focused, large amounts of chakra erupted from Dustless's body as it gathered and circulated around his body. A super monster formed completely from energy suddenly appeared. Ao 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 ao. It was a monster formed from the energy in Dustless's body, but it had reached a shocking level. Under Dustless's control, it was as though it had been given life as it let out an earth-shattering roar. The deafening roar caused one's soul to tremble. Layer after layer of chakra broke out of his body and quickly fused with it. Gradually, it turned into a huge figure. It was an exaggerated monster formed completely from energy. It was like a shark that had emerged from the water, revealing its ferocious appearance. It was wearing a simple armor with a ferocious Tengu armor on its head. Its extremely evil eyes were like the embodiment of a nightmare. It emitted a powerful force that made one's heart palpitate. Its huge body was extraordinarily mighty and filled with explosive power. Not to mention a complete Kinsisanu, even if it was a bug that was dozens of meters long, it would definitely cause a ruckus. Chapter 1727. What is that strange thing? The Hero King's eyes widened as his eyes darted around in shock. Buzz. A golden light covered the sky as the entire world was bathed in golden light. Looking up, a super behemoth suddenly appeared. Its exaggerated height of 100 meters left the Hero King dumbfounded. Dustless's true face? Sensing the ancient aura exuding from the prehistoric giant, Saber muttered to herself in a daze. Even if Wei Gong Qixi used command curse to order me and Archer to join forces, it doesn't seem like we can defeat Dustless. If that's the case, I have a clear conscience. Sensing the invincible aura of the giant that could annihilate the world, Saber wasn't disappointed or sad. Instead, she revealed a charming smile. As a knight, she abided by the ideals of knights. Dustless had done her a favor, but because of Wei Gong Qixi's orders, she had no choice but to draw her sword against Dustless. This made her feel guilty. Now that Dustless had the strength to deal with her and Archer, Saber was truly happy. At the same time, the massive golden light slammed into Kinsisanu's retreating body, instantly devouring its massive leg. Boom, boom, boom. An intense explosion suddenly spread out. Kinsisanu's massive body only trembled slightly before remaining motionless. When the smoke dissipated, Kinsisanu didn't even have a single wound left on it. Gulp. Seeing this scene, Saber choked in disbelief. The sharpness of Excalibur was self-evident. She knew it very well, but now that she had attacked the monster with all her might, it didn't even leave a scratch. This truly refreshed Saber's understanding. Darn pervert. The Hero King was also dumbfounded when he saw this, as he could not help but curse. Many years ago, I was already in a different dimension from the both of you. Inside the golden complete Kinsisanu, Dustless looked down at the two people on the ground expressionlessly. Finally, Kinsisanu's tachi of light was unsheathed. Clang, clang, clang. The huge blade, which was more than 10 meters long, shone brightly in the sky. It was as terrifying as a guillotine. Of course, the target of this guillotine was not one or two people. It was the entire Eastern Mu world. Hero King. Now do you understand what I meant by my previous words? In front of the complete Kinsisanu, all moves are weak. Under the control of his mind, Kinsisanu perfect form lifted the tachi of light. Bastard, give me my holy grail. Kinsisanu's perfect form's descent also shocked Wei Gong Qixi and Yen Feng Qili. Especially when they saw Kinsisanu's 100-meter tall super figure, Wei Gong Qixi's heart was filled with despair. Even if the two kings joined forces, they would not be a match for this monster. You want me to give you the Holy Grail? Dream on. You should just die, you despicable Wei Gong Qixi. Yen Feng Qili sneered coldly. In his opinion, Wei Gong Qixi was a hypocrite. He was clearly an evil wolf, so why was he pretending to be kind? He even had delusions of becoming a righteous partner. What a joke. Don't even think of stopping me from obtaining the Holy Grail. Without any hesitation, he pounced towards Wei Gong Qixi. It was impossible for him to hand over the Holy Grail. There was no room for negotiation. Yen Feng Qili also had endless doubts, hoping to get the answer from the Holy Grail. Gulp. The Hero King stared at the super-huge sword in the sky with his mouth agape. He could not hide the fear in his heart as his body began to retreat uncontrollably. What kind of joke is this? It's just a scam. There's no way I'm afraid. The Hero King's face flushed red with anger. At the same time, a bright light flashed behind him. An ancient flying device inlaid with gorgeous gems flew out from the gate of Babylon. His handsome face was filled with indescribable determination. He decisively jumped onto the gorgeous flying device. From the looks of it, he wanted to fight to the death with Dustless to settle the matter. Fool who doesn't know his limits. Seeing the Hero King soar into the sky without any fear, Dustless could not help but shake his head. He gently swung the perfect form Kinsisanu's saber out. Shoo. The massive saber blade immediately stood out as it charged straight at the Hero King, who was like a king of the sky. So powerful. The Hero King's eyes could not help but twitch. Even though the saber wind had yet to approach his body, he could not help but catch a glimpse of the shadow of death. To this day, Dustless's Kinsusanoo had already reached the pinnacle of perfection, shocking the world. Ka. The perfect form Kinsusanoo's might was too immense. The flying device that the Hero King was controlling seemed to have lost its effectiveness. It began to wander around uncontrollably, as though it could tilt and be destroyed at any moment. Don't underestimate me. The Hero King, who was feeling pissed, exploded. Obedient Parting Sword once again unleashed an extremely destructive attack. He stared at the incoming saber wind and used all his strength to shoot out the edge. Enuma Elish. Two powerful moves in a situation where there was no one to stop them, inevitably collided. A superstorm that wanted to destroy the world spread out. Excalibur, at the same time Saber, who was under the control of the command curse, also launched a lethal attack at Dustless. The combined attack of Saber and the Hero King was surprisingly powerful. However, as for Saber's attack, it was completely ignored by Dustless. It was not that he looked down on her, but with his present strength, the chances of him cracking the strengthened perfect form Kinsusanoo was 0. Therefore, Dustless naturally had nothing to worry about. Chapter 1728. Boom, 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 boom. Saber's Excalibur struck Kinsusanoo's perfect form, immediately producing large amounts of smoke and dust. Blazing flames soared into the sky. So. A cold wind blew from the rift, revealing the perfect form Kinsusanoo's quaint and unscathed body. What a detestable evildoer. At the very least he should have gone easy on me. At least we can be considered acquaintances. Saber gave a wry smile as he made a rare joke to amuse himself. He had been dealt a blow by the perfect form Kinsusanoo's indestructible defense. At the same time, the saber wind produced by the perfect form Kinsusanoo and the sharpness of Obedient Parting Sword made close contact. Boom, boom, boom. The void immediately trembled as a chaotic rift spread out. It devoured the void and dismembered the world, presenting a tragic scene of doomsday. Geez, this big guy may be scary, but that's only on the surface. The Hero King, who was riding on a pearlescent jewel aircraft, regained some of his shattered confidence. This time he was not at a disadvantage in the clash between the perfect form Kinsusanoo and Obedient Parting Sword. Are you that happy to be able to block my attack? You even forgot your identity and laughed heartily. Dustless, who was inside the perfect form Kinsusanoo, looked calmly at the Hero King. Following that, the perfect form Kinsusanoo brandished his great sword once again. How can a mortal like you understand this king's feelings? This is obviously something to be happy about. Without even thinking, the Hero King answered decisively. Up to this point in the battle he had been crushed by Dustless. Now he had finally turned the tables. Although it was a draw, the Hero King had regained a lot of his confidence. He was grinning from ear to ear. Seeing Dustless's perfect form Kinsusanoo preparing to attack once again, the Hero King did not want to fall behind. He raised Obedient Parting Sword in his hand as well. Immortal technique. Dustless's perfect Kinsusanoo's aura became dull. Originally, the Uchiha clan's Sharingan was a very evil type, and Kinsusanoo gave off a very sinister and gloomy feeling. But this time, with the integration of the Senjutsu, the unique temperament suddenly changed. The complete form Kinsusanoo's enormous body was right in front of his eyes, yet it felt like it was far away from him. It felt like it had blended into nature, as if it had become one with nature. Immortal technique. Kinsusanoo. With Dustless's words, the perfect Kinsusanoo's physique was enhanced once again. Under the Hero King's incredulous gaze, it grew another 10 to 20 meters. This is too ridiculous. The Hero King's lips trembled as he witnessed the enlarged perfect Kinsusanoo. Immediately he felt insulted. Dustless's perfect Kinsusanoo from before was not at its peak. This meant that he had deliberately gone easy on him and was looking down on him. Darn thing. The enraged Gilgamesh could no longer tolerate it. The Obedient Parting Sword in his hand once again pulsed with a red vortex as it gradually enlarged. Enuma Elish. Accompanied by the Hero King's rage, a powerful attack came straight at him. It was about to devour the perfect Kinsusanoo. What a boring trick. Upon seeing this, Dustless shook his head slightly. Immortal technique, Xianxia immediately waved his hand nonchalantly. Boom, boom, boom. A golden saber wind that was several times more terrifying than before flashed. Its might and speed were several times more powerful than before. In an instant, it tore apart the Hero King's trusted attack. Poochie. The dark red energy vortexes, which were getting bigger and bigger, were instantly destroyed. It was as simple as tearing a piece of paper. They were annihilated in the blink of an eye. Cracks that were more than 10 meters deep appeared on the ground. It was extremely terrifying. The shock waves that spread out in all directions even crushed the surrounding mountains into powder. Poochie. It was the same for the Hero King himself. His entire body had been penetrated by the saber wind of Xianxia. His body had an additional shocking crack and gap. His entire body had nearly been split into two. I'm really sorry. I did not mean to put you in this state. It's just that I was displeased with your petty victory, so I used a little more strength. After dispelling Immortal technique, Xianxia, Dustless's body landed on the ground. He looked apologetically at the Hero King. This bastard's organs had been completely destroyed. His death was only a matter of time. Shoo. However, the furious strike of Immortal technique, Xianxia, did not stop there. It continued pressing forward, and with an unstoppable speed, it blasted towards the Holy Grail that Yanfeng Qili and Wei Gong Qixi were fighting over. Boom, boom, boom. An earth-shattering explosion swept out as the exquisite Holy Grail was pulverized by Xianxia's saber wind. Not even a residue was left behind. The disgusting liquid contained in the Holy Grail, the evil of this world, also spread out. Indeed, it's easy for a person to do stupid things when angered. Upon seeing this, Dustless smacked his head as he felt a headache coming on. His mind had indeed been thrown into chaos by the Hero King's arrogant tone. He had deliberately suppressed the power of Xianxia, but such a thing had still happened. No, this isn't my fault. It can only be said that this place is too small. After a moment of silence, Dustless suddenly shook his head and pushed all his faults to the back of his mind. This ending isn't bad either. Lying on the ground, the Hero King's eyes were turbid. His dying tone was filled with schadenfreude. His abdomen had already been penetrated by Dustless. It was completely over. I'm sorry, Saber. Turning his head to look at Saber, Dustless realized that her body was gradually dissipating. She was about to vanish, but there was nothing he could do about it. After all, the Holy Grail had been destroyed. Chapter 1729. The Holy Grail was destroyed, and the dark red liquid that it contained, the evil of this world, invaded the land wantonly, rapidly expanding its territory and occupying the entire land in an instant. The dead Hero King and company were instantly covered by the black mud. Apologize. I should be the one apologizing. Saber shook her head and said awkwardly, I didn't choose the right master this time. I didn't expect to leave you with so much trouble in the end. Be it Wei Gong Qixi or Yanfeng Qili, I don't wish for them to obtain the Holy Grail. Your actions are exactly what I want. Then your wish should wait for the next Holy Grail war. I will use the Holy Relic to summon you. Dustless's mouth twitched. He originally wanted to say that the so-called Holy Grail war was just a trick to fool people. But after thinking about it, he decided against it. After being defeated by Wei Gong Qixi, if he were to tell Saber the truth of the Holy Grail war, she might just give up on herself. Following that, Saber's body turned into starlight and disappeared with the wind. Damn it, damn it, damn it. It's all your fault, you idiot. Yanfeng Qili and Wei Gong Qixi pointed at each other's noses and cursed. Both of them coveted the Holy Grail, and now that it was destroyed by Dustless in one move, they pushed the blame to each other. The two of you, an indifferent voice spread out. Yanfeng Qili and Wei Gong Qixi, who heard the voice, could not help but shudder. Dustless. Seeing Dustless's figure, Wei Gong Qixi and Yanfeng Qili were stunned. The Holy Grail has disappeared, but why are you still alive? This doesn't make sense. That thing is worthless. I continue to exist because my way of existence is above the Holy Grail. Don't compare me with other heroic spirits. Dustless snorted and looked down on such a rigid concept. Common sense was only effective on ordinary people. Cough, cough, cough. Everything is over then. Dustless cleared his throat and looked at Yanfeng Qili and Wei Gong Qixi. The Fourth Holy Grail War has ended. Then for world peace can the two of you die as well? For world peace? You bastard, how dare you say such things? Hearing this, Yanfeng Qili and Wei Gong Qixi were both angry and amused. Looking at the huge crack on the ground that was about to be split into two, they cursed Dustless's shamelessness in their hearts. It was all because of Consisanu. This bastard almost destroyed Dongmu City, and now he's saying that I'm a threat to world peace. Wei Gong Qixi and Yanfeng Qili's faces darkened as they cursed Dustless thousands of times. Bang! Wei Gong Qixi clearly did not want to die, so he turned around and launched a sneak attack on Dustless. Bang bang bang! Dustless's head was like a water droplet, splattering in all directions. However, before Wei Gong Qi could rejoice, the wound gradually healed. I wanted to be merciful and give you a quick death. Since you like to die so much, I'll torture you to death slowly. Dustless's scarlet eyes fell on Wei Gong Qi's head as he shouted, Tens Ho. A pitch-black flame appeared out of thin air and landed on Wei Gong Qi's head without any warning. Kill me if you dare. Wei Gong Qixi was rolling on the ground, screaming miserably. His words were filled with endless hatred, but Wu Chen didn't pay attention to him. He just walked lazily to Yanfeng Qili, who was in a daze. As for you, staring at Yanfeng Qili's lifeless eyes, Dustless said, You're luckier than Wei Gong Qi. After all, you're still useful. If you're lucky, you might be able to survive. Lucky? Yanfeng Qili looked at Dustless blankly. Seeing his playful eyes, he felt a chill in his heart. He still hoped that Dustless would give him a quick death. Gulp. The disgusting dark red liquid, the evil of this world, spread out and bubbled like boiling water. It even had visible boiling steam. Fire release, great fireball technique. A huge fireball came out of Dustless's mouth and surged into the evil of this world. It was instantly swallowed, and then a scene that made Yanfeng Qili break down appeared. Boom boom boom. A huge fire rose up and ignited the evil of this world, that was slowly moving on the ground. The temperature rose rapidly and the area within a few kilometers turned into a sea of fire in the blink of an eye. You're so evil. You want to burn me alive? You said that I could survive if I was lucky. Lucky my ass. Yanfeng Qili was so angry at Dustless that he couldn't speak properly. He had never been good at talking, but now he was cursing. It was enough to show how frustrated he was. It wasn't that Yanfeng Qili was afraid of death, but he still didn't fully understand the meaning of life. He was just unwilling to die now. You can't say that. Although the chances of survival are slim, it's still better than Wei Gong Qili. Pointing at Wei Gong Qili, who was still struggling in the Amaterasu, Dustless smiled innocently. You're lucky to be burned to death in an instant. Look at the unlucky Wei Gong Qili. I purposely lowered the power of the Amaterasu to the minimum and burned this ungrateful bastard to death bit by bit. Compared to him, Yanfeng Qili, you're so lucky. Lucky. Hearing Wu Chen's bizarre theory, Yanfeng Qili wished he could give him a slap. This fellow looked rather sunny on the surface, but he was extremely sinister and ruthless behind his back. Yanfeng Qili felt that the term smiling tiger was too apt to describe Dustless. On one hand, he could communicate with you in a friendly manner, but on the other hand, he could torture you to death in the most painful way. He was hypocritical and fake. Please don't die. After glancing at Yanfeng and Qili, Dustless strutted away. A Holy Grail war would take about 60 years. However, because the Holy Grail was destroyed this time, the magic power was not released. The next Holy Grail war would only take 10 years. Chapter 1730. That despicable eighth heroic spirit. Yanfeng Qili was going crazy as he looked at the sea of fire around him. It seemed like there was no way to escape. The fire around him was so thick that it seemed like he could not escape unscathed. It was as difficult as defeating Dustless. That guy is so shameless as a heroic spirit. I have never seen such a despicable heroic spirit. He is worse than a hooligan and a scumbag. Yanfeng Qili was furious. Dustless gave him an extremely bad impression. On one hand, he could kill people mercilessly. On the other hand, he had such disgusting words like peaceful and kind on his lips. Just thinking about it made Yanfeng Qili want to vomit. Let's think of a way to escape from this damned place first. Yanfeng Qili's sharp eyes looked around. He ignored Takemiya Jishi, who was still rolling in the sea of fire. He was like a headless fly, wandering around aimlessly looking for the light of dawn, the exit of the sea of fire. It hurts. I'm so thirsty. Strange. What is going on? In the ocean of fire that was several kilometers in size, the boy's feeble moans suddenly echoed. His face was dark and his bright eyes had lost their luster and beauty. His body collapsed to the ground and he raised his head to look at the sky. His eyes were blank and dim. Why is there suddenly fire? The boy who was only a few years old muttered unconsciously. He had short red hair and his cheeks were cute. His lifeless eyes were filled with dirt as he stared blankly into the void. No one knew what he was thinking. This person was the future Takemiya Shiro. Time flew. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed. The previous battle had destroyed the Ahrensburg family's castle, but Dustless used a large number of shadow clones to repair it. After all, this was his only residence. If he left, he would have to sleep on the streets. This is strange. Since the Holy Grail War is over, why are you still alive? Did you use the power of the Holy Grail to regain your body? Inside the castle that Dustless had just repaired, Rin Enbin grabbed his clothes and asked, "Little brat, go away. I don't have time to deal with you." Dustless saw this and waved his hand impatiently, indicating for Rin Enbin to stand aside. He still had important things to do, so he didn't have time to play with this little witch. "Ling, come over here. Don't get in the way of Mr. Dustless. You're the heir of the House of Inaka, so you have to pay attention to your manners." Kuei Inaka smiled and waved her hand. She scratched Ling's nose and motioned for Ling not to cause trouble. He glanced at Dustless a few times. Although he couldn't figure out what Dustless was trying to do, his serious expression and the special way he was forming seals seemed to indicate that he was preparing for some kind of move. Phew. Fortunately, my eye power and the amount of chakra I have is unprecedented. Otherwise, I would have been exhausted to death sooner or later. But then again, although this technique consumes a lot of energy, it's undeniably very convenient. At this moment, Dustless's left eye has turned into Rinnegan Sharingan. And in front of him was a large pile of glittering golden fragments. To be exact, they were actually fragments of the Holy Grail. In fact, these were all transformed from Alice Phil's body. Dustless's current mission was to revive Alice Phil. To be more precise, it was to restore the Holy Grail. Outer Path, Rinnegan Technique. Alice Phil was the vessel of the Holy Grail. From the moment she was killed, she became the carrier of the Holy Grail, used to carry the souls of the heroic spirits. And these fragments of the Holy Grail, in a sense, were Alice Phil's corpse. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The light of the emerald shrouded the fragments of the Holy Grail. Then an incredible scene happened. These so-called fragments actually glowed with an indescribable magical power, as if they were endowed with spirituality. They began to understand on their own and began to self-assemble. In just a dozen seconds, all the fragments were gathered and finally turned into a brand new exquisite Holy Grail. Then, under the dumbfounded gaze of Ling and Kuei Inaka, a bright light flashed across the surface of the golden Holy Grail. Then it slowly turned into a graceful human body. Taking a closer look, it was the dead Alice Phil. "Are you kidding me? How can you do such a thing? I heard from Saber that Wei Gong Kisi is dead." Kuai and Ling exclaimed in shock. Their high-spirited tone was even a little sharp. Their eyes were wide open as they stared at Dustless. They stared at him motionlessly. They had already understood what this guy wanted to do. Their breathing immediately became several times heavier. "Both of you lower your voices. I can't concentrate." Dustless's forehead was covered in sweat. The burden of reviving Alice Phil this time was greater than he had imagined. Hum hum hum. About 10 seconds later, Sleeping Beauty suddenly opened her eyes. Her mouth let out an unconscious murmur, the kind of soft sound that one would make when they were asleep. It was abnormally vague and very subtle. "Didn't I die?" About 10 seconds later, Alice Phil's familiar voice drifted into Dustless's ears. "Although it sounds a bit weird, I still have to tell you seriously that you have been resurrected by me, Alice Phil." Dustless's gentle and slightly tired voice echoed in Alice Phil's ears. "You can even do something like that? Don't tell me your family members are high-ranking officials in heaven? Can you get in through the back door?" Alice Phil touched her body. She was both surprised and happy. She even cracked a joke, which was extremely rare. Can you revive Saber and Shurchin?" At this moment, Kuai Inaka asked excitedly with a trembling voice. Her crystal eyes were filled with hope and passion. She even wanted to melt Dustless's heart. However, Dustless's face was as cold as ice. Her hopes were destined to be dashed. I'm sorry. I can't do that. The reincarnation of heaven technique can only be used a limited number of times. I can't use it casually. Dustless did not even think about it and directly rejected her. Without a doubt, the reason why Shurchen Inaka could be revived was because Dustless did not like this guy. He was not a good person either. It was better to say goodbye while it was still early. As for Saber's situation, it was a bit special. The outer path, reincarnation of heaven technique, could revive someone from the dead. However, there was a very important prerequisite. In order to revive someone, the person must first be dead. However, Saber did not actually die. Other than Dustless, Saber was the only person who could not spiritualize. As for why, it was because she was not dead. It was impossible to revive someone who was not dead. Before Saber died, she made a deal with the world's consciousness to obtain the Holy Grail. The price was to become a heroic spirit and work for the world's consciousness. Therefore, the time before Saber's death was fixed. Saber was sent to participate in the Holy Grail War. When Saber obtained the Holy Grail, the world's consciousness fulfilled its promise. Only then would the time before Saber's death begin to flow. Saber would die and become a heroic spirit. As Saber was on the verge of death when she participated in the Holy Grail War, she was still alive. She was not a true heroic spirit. She was only fighting for the Holy Grail as a heroic spirit. Therefore, the outer path, reincarnation of heaven technique, could not revive Saber unless she was completely dead. Only then could Dustless activate the reincarnation of heaven technique to revive Saber. Chapter 1731. Although Dustless was strong, he wasn't omnipotent in some things. At least he couldn't solve Saber's problem unless Saber was willing to commit suicide. Where's Kisi? Looking around, Alice Phil thought of Wei Gong Kisi. Him. He should be dead. Dustless was a little disappointed. He didn't expect Alice Phil to still care about that scumbag Wei Gong Kisi. He couldn't help but feel disappointed. That bastard. Alice Phil's next sentence stunned Dustless. Should that bastard didn't die? Isn't the heavens blind? Alice Phil said fiercely. Her words were filled with endless disgust. Her expression was filled with resentment. At this moment, Alice Phil gave people the impression that she hated Wei Gong Kisi from the bottom of her soul. Why do you hate him so much? If I remember correctly, you two seem to be husband and wife. Dustless asked softly after being surprised. Alice Phil's sudden change in attitude caught him off guard. Husband and wife? It would have been better if Dustless didn't say the word husband and wife. As soon as his voice fell, Alice Phil, an active volcano, couldn't help but erupt instantly. She scolded angrily. That bastard. He watched me being taken away by Yen Feng Chili without doing anything. No matter how I begged him, Wei Gong Kisi turned a deaf ear. Dustless was silent. He could understand Wei Gong Kisi's actions. It couldn't be helped. Alice Phil was the carrier of the Holy Grail. If he wanted to revive the Holy Grail, he had to kill her. Wei Gong Kisi, who wanted to get the Holy Grail, would definitely not save Alice Phil. It was good enough that he didn't do it himself. Speaking of which, is the Holy Grail War over? You can still maintain your body. Could it be, you won the final victory? Alice Phil looked at Dustless doubtfully. He was Sarvant. The Holy Grail War was over. Dustless could maintain his body. Could only mean that he won the final victory and used the Holy Grail to revive again. Due to some special reasons. I destroyed the Holy Grail. Dustless's face was filled with helplessness as he gave an answer that made Alice Phil not know whether to laugh or cry. My way of existence is somewhat bizarre. Even if the Holy Grail is destroyed, I won't disappear like the other heroic spirits, Dustless continued to explain. There is no victor in this Holy Grail War. Although it's a pity, I can still accept this ending. It's better than a hypocrite like Wei Gong Kisi obtaining the Holy Grail. Alice Phil heaved a sigh of relief and revealed a charming smile. Alice Phil seems to hate Wei Gong Kisi to death. Dustless looked directly at the gloating Alice Phil and nodded in relief. He asked, "Oh right, Alice Phil, I have something to ask you. There's no harm in telling me. I'll do my best to help you if I can." The corner of Alice Phil's mouth lifted slightly. A bright smile hung on her gentle face as she looked at Dustless's handsome face. A strange look flashed in her eyes as she took the initiative to approach Dustless. No matter what, Dustless might be despicable and shameless. He might be unscrupulous and use all the people he could to achieve his goals. However, one thing was certain. Dustless would definitely not be as despicable as Wei Gongqi. In order to achieve his goals, he would even use his own wife and disregard his own life. Dustless would definitely not use such a despicable method. Wei Gongqi used to summon Saber's holy item, Avalon, which is the scabbard of the Excalibur. If you want to summon Saber in the next Holy Grail War, you'll still need it. Dustless's meaning was self-evident. He hoped that Aliceville would hand over Avalon. Forgive me for not being able to do that. Aliceville looked like she was in a difficult position as she said bitterly, Avalon is not with me. Before I was captured by Yen Feng Qili, Qixi had already taken it away. That heartless man. Dustless's face stiffened as a haze flashed across his face. He said in a deep voice, that means Avalon is with Wei Gongqi? That kid is really despicable. Was the scene of him being burned by the Tensho purposely for me to see? Avalon could heal and recover all injuries. Even the aging process would be stopped. By releasing the real name, the strongest barrier of protection would be activated. Even interference based on magic would be ineffective. The existence of this relic itself was equivalent to magic. Are you planning to use Avalon to summon Saber in the next Holy Grail War? That's about 60 years later. You're really in love with Saber. Aliceville rolled her eyes and was speechless. Dustless remained silent. He was too lazy to explain to Aliceville. Some things could never be explained clearly. Moreover, the more he explained to a woman, the more blurry it would be. Silence was enough. Let's wait quietly. Staring at the charming scenery outside the window, Dustless muttered to himself. It did not matter even if Avalon was not there. After all, someone would summon Saber for Dustless in the end. It was not bad to wait for 10 years. Time flew by like an arrow. In the blink of an eye, 10 years had passed. Dustless was a 10-tailed beast. His lifespan and time were equivalent to infinity. He had no concept of time. It had passed in the blink of an eye. The biggest feeling he had was that Rin and Osaka and Sakurama had grown up from ignorant kids to young girls. At the same time, it meant that the 5th Holy Grail War was coming. Time really flies. The next morning, Dustless got out of bed and stared lazily at the rising sun outside the window. 10 years felt like a day. There were no traces of age on his face. He always looked like he was 17 or 18 years old. In the warm bed, there was a white-haired woman curled up. She blinked her eyelashes and had a happy smile on her face. It was Aliceville. Chapter 1732. After 10 years, Dustless had completely conquered Aliceville. Dustless, what are you worried about? It's rare to see you frowning like this. Aliceville, whose face was flushed red, poked her head out of the quilt and looked at Dustless, who was staring at the void. She stretched her body and the happiness on her face could not be concealed. Women who had been nourished by men were all like this. Only when they lost something would they know how to cherish it. It was the same for everyone. A heartless betrayal led to the death of Aliceville. After that, she was resurrected by Dustless with his heaven-defying ability. Aliceville also obtained a brand new life. She valued Dustless very much and he became everything in her life. It's nothing. It's just that the 5th Holy Grail War is about to begin and I still have no clue. I'm just a little annoyed. Waving his hand, Dustless signaled Aliceville that there was no need to worry. Are you also going to participate in the Holy Grail War this time? Aliceville hugged Dustless from behind. Her voice was trembling a little. It was obvious that she was worried. After all, the shadow of the previous Holy Grail War still existed. That's right. Who asked me to promise you? Dustless gently held Aliceville's little hand, feeling the warmth between them, and said softly, if I don't participate in this Holy Grail War, Ilya will face the same ending as you. When the 3 words Ilya were mentioned, Aliceville's whole body seemed to have been electrocuted. After a while, Aliceville choked and said, thank you, Ilya is innocent. I don't want her to be implicated. Of course. Leave everything to me. Dustless smiled gently when he heard that. His confident look made people involuntarily feel relieved. Wei Gongqi was a scumbag, but Ilya was different. Although the two were related by blood, their personalities were worlds apart. Compared to the despicable Wei Gongqi, Ilya was much more naive. Just like what Aliceville said, Ilya was innocent. She knew nothing about everything. Speaking of which, did you find Saber's holy relic Avalon? Changing the topic, Alice Field worriedly said, "We don't have any other heroic spirits' holy relics at the moment. It seems impossible to summon Sarvant." "Avalon, don't worry about it. Don't forget who I am. I'm a heroic spirit who obtained a body." Dustless smiled mysteriously and said, "Actually, I've already found Avalon, but I'm keeping it with that little brat for the time being. Alice Phil, I have something to deal with now. You can continue to rest for the time being." "Something will happen to you?" Alice Phil stared at Dustless in surprise. A hint of awkwardness flashed across her face. Over the years, Dustless spent most of his time doing things that were not suitable for children with her. Of course, there was also Rin's mother, Oki Enosaka. It was just that Rin and Tama Tanjing didn't know about it. The three of them often got together to do those kinds of shameless things. Dustless didn't force Oki Enosaka and Alice Phil. As the saying went, the fusion of yin and yang gave birth to all things. This was the nature of living things. The mutual taking of men and women was in line with the nature of all things. But the only thing that surprised Alice Phil was that Dustless rarely said the words, "I have something to deal with," like today. Over the years he spent most of his time idling around in the Ahrensburg family castle. They talked about love together, talked about life with Oki Enosaka and Alice Phil. When they were bored they could even tease Rin and Tama Tanjing. Life was very enjoyable. "Up to you. Just be careful." Alice Field nodded gently and then lazily crawled back into her bed. Everything was left to Dustless to handle. He wasn't a scumbag like Kimiya Michiko who needed a woman's help in everything he did. He even needed his wife to be the bait. At the end of the day, women were meant to be taken care of, not used as props. Creak. Gently pushing open the door, Dustless, who was wearing pajamas, walked out of the bedroom. In the corridor he happened to pass by a young girl with a slightly gloomy expression. "Rin, that's rare. I didn't expect you to be so gloomy." Looking at the dejected girl, Dustless lazily walked over. This person was Rin Enosaka, who had grown up. She was slim and graceful, and her body had inherited her mother's advantage. She had a curvy figure. Ling practically watched Dustless grow up. The relationship between the two people was also self-evident. Seeing Dustless slowly walk over, Rin Enosaka only snorted softly. "Don't assume that everyone's thoughts are as dirty as yours. Really, how can there be such a weird heroic spirit like you?" When Dustless, Oki Enosaka and Alice Phil were talking about life, it was inevitable that Sakura and Rin would occasionally bump into them. When the two sisters were still young he could still fool them, but now that they were older, it was impossible to continue fooling them. "You're still as arrogant as before. Really, you might not be able to find a boyfriend if you're so ruthless." Dustless sighed compassionately. He was now Rin Enosaka's father in name. "I don't need a weird uncle like you to poke your nose into other people's business." Rin Enosaka made a funny face, rudely rebuking Dustless. Hearing this, the corner of Wu Chen's mouth twitched fiercely. "A strange old cow who eats young grass? Watch your words." Dustless glared fiercely at Rin. Without further ado he handed her a special bag. "You're having a headache because of this, right? This is a heroic spirit's holy relic." Rin Enosaka was overjoyed. She stared straight at the ancient ruby necklace in Dustless's hand. Its unique ancient aura was faintly decaying. Chapter 1733. Rin Enosaka stared at the holy relic in Dustless's hand. She was just worried about not having a suitable holy relic to summon a heroic spirit, and Dustless was kind enough to give her a pillow. But, hee, Rin Enosaka knew that things were not going well when she heard the sudden creepy laughter. She looked at Dustless's sly smile and knew that things were not as simple as she thought. "Do you want it?" Dustless waved the ruby necklace in his hand and licked his lips. He smiled innocently and said, "Come Rin, call me daddy." Don't even think about it." Rin Enosaka turned her head away without a second thought. She did not even look at Dustless. This courage is really admirable." Dustless gave her a thumbs up and then put away the holy relic with a look of pity. He sighed and said, "It seems that some people have forgotten the glory of the Enosaka family. So it doesn't matter to her whether she participates in this Holy Grail war or not. She has nothing to do with the decline of the Enosaka family." When he mentioned her, Wu Chen deliberately emphasized the word her, and his eyes even looked at Ling. The meaning was self-evident. "You this family," Rin glared at him and said word by word, You are a heroic spirit, but you are shameless enough to bully a weak little girl. You are a disgrace to all heroic spirits. A weak little girl. Dustless's eyes widened. He looked as if he had just discovered a new continent. He curled his lips and said, "You always interrupt my business. If I don't teach you a lesson, you will become more and more presumptuous. Hurry up and call me Daddy Rin." Every time Dustless talked about life with Alice Phil or Akui and Osaka, this mischievous little girl would come up with all sorts of strange reasons to send Akui and Osaka away. Dustless could only grit his teeth. Now that he finally had a chance to get back at her, he would not let it go so easily. Definitely not. Rin and Osaka still stubbornly shook her head. This was a matter of principle. No matter what, she would not compromise. Really? In other words, you don't plan to participate in this Holy Grail war? What a pity. I reckon that Zhou Xian will not die in peace. Farewell Ling. Dustless left with a myriad of emotions. Hee little girl, you still want to fight with me? No matter what, I've lived for hundreds of years. If I can't even deal with a stinky girl like you, where will I put my face? The moment he turned around, Dustless, whose back was facing Rin to Saga, chuckled in his heart. At the same time he thought to himself, in 3 seconds this little girl will definitely lower her head to me. 3, 2, 1. Stop right there. Seeing that Dustless was really going to leave, Rin Enbin finally couldn't take it anymore and walked over angrily. This little girl's stubbornness is beyond words. She insists on being stubborn. Wouldn't it have been better if she had bowed her head earlier? Dustless slandered her in his heart. At the same time he turned his head with a beautiful smile. I. Thinking about Dustless's shameful request, Rin Enbin's face was as red as an apple. My dear father. In the end, Rin gritted her teeth and called out with a resolute expression. That's more like it. Dustless smiled and nodded when he heard this. He decisively acted shamelessly and continued, Rin, repeat it for me. You have to say, my dear father, please give the holy relic to your daughter. Not a single word missing. Dustless, how shameless are you? Rin Enbin's face turned red when she heard this. In her heart she cursed Dustless for being shameless. Did he have to be so shameless? You're not going to say it? Then goodbye. I still have things to do, so I'll leave first. Dustless turned around and left again. You win. Rin Enbin was so angry that she stomped her feet. In the end she gritted her teeth and blocked Dustless again. Her smile was uglier than crying. My dear father, hurry up and give the holy relic to your daughter. Children should be so obedient. Only then will they be liked by adults. Take it, Rin. Dustless casually tossed the holy relic to Rin. He did not forget to remind her. Actually, you don't have to participate in this Holy Grail war. After all, the final victor will still be me. Then I want to participate. Rin Enbin rolled her eyes at Dustless. She glared at him fiercely as if to say that she would not let this matter rest. Kid, you're still a kid. Dustless saw this and shook his head. Then he directly left and rushed to another location, Miyashiro's house. The heavens have not abandoned me. This Holy Grail war is actually 50 years earlier than the previous one. Only 10 years have passed since the last war. In fact, this Holy Grail war has actually started earlier. In Miyashiro's house, a dispirited man with a face full of stubble was excitedly muttering to himself. His expression was abnormally excited. Even his hands and feet were trembling, very thought-provoking. This person was Miyakase. In the original work he had actually died a few years ago. However, after Dustless's wanton destruction, this plane's development had already gone in the opposite direction from the original work. It was only similar in some areas. You want to continue participating in the Holy Grail war with this appearance of yours? You must be joking. A ghostly voice suddenly rang out without any warning. Could the owner of this voice be? When Miyakase heard this, his face turned gloomy. The joy on his face was also swept away. The tone of this nightmare's voice was the man he hated the most and the man he did not want to see the most in his life. He would never forget it even if he turned into ashes. 10 years ago I destroyed the Holy Grail for today. The magic of the previous Holy Grail war was not released. Therefore this Holy Grail war is 50 years earlier than the previous one. It is worth celebrating, but you have no right to participate.